The best Damn League Show period is brought to you by eSportsBet, the industry's leading crypto odds matrix. Use our referral link in the description box below for a first-time deposit bonus of 50% on up to $200 or take advantage of their new alternate first deposit bonus where you can get up to 100 USDT forgiven if you lose the first bet. Just message the mod mail on Discord and tell them Insight and Esports or IOE sent you, and they'll give you up to 100 USDT back if indeed you lose. Could be some cheeky ones you want to bet on at Worlds or something, right? Now let's get into the show. Right, this is going to be another episode of the best Damn League Show period, and of course this is going to put a period on the summer split, isn't it? Because it's over. All of LEC's done for the year. There's only Worlds after this. Spoiler, we're not going to do like Worlds versions of the show. We're just going to obviously be on other content and do all the rest of it as we are summoning Insight. Or maybe Dom will come on Summon Insight. Maybe that'll happen for an episode. Maybe before NA gets eliminated. Sort of group stage playing, whatever. All the whatever. We know the usual jokes. Look, it is the LEC show, to be fair, so I have to sort of bang on that angle. Like it is the time-honoured tradition at this point in time, innit? And spoiler, just miss me with all the cope that any fans used to have. You know, the angle they used to use was sort of like, well, as long as none of us wins Worlds, we're all sort of bad. And it's like, nah, there's definitely gradations, don't there? You know, like in life, you don't really do it that way, do you? You don't go, well, he's salesman of the year and you're the worst. I was like, well, you're already second best. It's like, that's not really an argument, is it? That argument falls pretty flat if you think about it. It's a bit unfair, isn't it?
I mean, to defend my fellow Americans, it is kind of weird when like you get third place paraded around like you just like won Worlds. Like for example,
yes.
when G2 was doing well, you got like, we can't say shit. Like when Fnatic was doing well, making World Finals, you can't say shit. Last year, like what the fuck? Like, all right, like sure, we both got eliminated 3-0 in the fucking quarterfinals. Like who really cares? So for me,
fair, sure.
Yeah, for me, I'm actually like, well, we'll see how Worlds goes, but I think that there's a possibility we might get no one getting out of groups. I think that could be
I'm
realistic.
For that. I got so scared you were going to be like, there's a chance that NA does its best. I thought you were going to do the Azael tweet like, this is the most confident I've ever been in NA. It's like, did you just watch the Cloud9 before the finals, bro? Like, this is garbage. But anyway, that's well, it's not the NA show, so come and hit me.
Look, I might be most confident for this roster out of all the rosters we've sent recently, but that's because I've been so like last year. I just thought there was no fucking shot. I thought it was like literally like a 3-15 group stage angle across the 18 games that are played. So
that's fair.
I actually feel like this roster at least looks more solid on paper. Now we just got to make sure that the meta doesn't change. We still have Enchanter support, so Sven can still play the game. If we get into like a Nautilus, Leona, Rakan meta, it is fucking doomed for NA. But you know, we'll see. We can back out and go for LEC first. We'll talk about this at a later date.
It's all good. Right. So obviously finals is done. Rogue won. Wait there a second. I know after all those whack Star Wars movies, the fans all stopped believing in the franchise. But then Rogue One happened, and then everyone started coming back. See what I did there? It's like sort of no, because here's the thing. That was just a whack pun. But I just want to make the point that like I can't believe I'm even starting an episode like this, Dom. So anyway, Rogue won the LEC finals, 3-0 in Caps and G2, and completely draft diffed them, and every single role actually outperformed. Like that actually just seems impossible to say. Like, let's be real. This show, obviously, we only did it this year. This show's a pretty good chronicle of where Rogue began and where they ended. Like if you think about like what happened in the spring, and then they sort of had their big moment in the upper bracket final against Fnatic with the reverse sweep. That I would say, look, that didn't tip them over, but it was clearly like a step on the journey, you know. Then they came to this split. They had to overcome in the playoffs and beat everyone. Now they obviously come from the low bracket and win. Let's just start there. What is the significance of Rogue winning? Because I saw that ridiculous exchange on Twitter where people just refused to read, where you were just like, yeah, it's weird that Rogue won because I don't really believe in them when they count. They're like, well, that match counted. You're like, yeah, I'm just saying I didn't believe in them in it. Like, yeah, but it counts though, does it? It's like, oh god, he's in a time loop.
They read what they want to read. They read me saying, well, semifinals doesn't count. I'm like, no, I don't believe in Rogue going into the semifinals. It's like, but they won. It's like, yes, I did. I still did not believe. Like, what? Of course, after they win, I'm like, yes, I believe they won. Yes. Like, I also am acknowledging reality, but it's just such a mental exchange because I don't understand why people would be like upset about that premise. I don't think anyone believed in them. Look at the desk. No one. But did you like? Okay, so I know you bet on Rogue.
It's because the odds were insane. I even said it. Yeah, I picked Fnatic and G2, of course.
Yeah, everyone would. So like that should be the moment. They overcame people's expectations.
Yes.
They played well when it mattered. And I think the crucial thing is that coming into like games 2 of Fnatic onward, they actually had good prep. They put themselves in positions to win, which it felt like that's always been one of the problems with Rogue, is that they start every series with the worst possible read on what to do. I mean, think about the last time they played G2. They're just banning Jarvan every game. Jarvan was like the most crucial pick for Malrong in this final, but they were banning that themselves. And then they were giving Flakked the Senna Seraphine. What the hell? Why are you giving them the best weak side bot lane when your advantage should be bot lane? Like, you have the better bot lane. It's what we've been saying the whole time on the show. So, I mean, I think that for once it seemed like Rogue was able to actually get an advantage from the prep, and G2 just was never able to, like, G2 and Fnatic, as soon as they were able to alter a couple things, Fnatic and G2 just couldn't compete. They weren't able to overcome that that situation in draft. Like, okay, now they're like giving their bot lane advantage. They're taking away the ability for us to just weak side bot. What are we going to do about that? In the Fnatic series, it was more that they were just taking out Humanoid's picks. They're forcing him into control mage versus control mage, which is Larson's bread and butter. Like, that's what Larson wants to be playing, right? So I felt like that was one of the most crucial things for Rogue, was the fact that they actually were able to put themselves in an advantageous position from the draft.
Absolutely. I think that was a massive key. Like, one thing I thought was very interesting overall was they themselves started doing stuff like experimenting with the Soraka, which obviously in the final was a massive thing, but they did that in the Fnatic series, if people forget. Because if people forget, the way that I actually have to give, what's funny is I actually think the way the playoffs went has completely killed the narrative that all those haters had, that like Yamato is utter trash as a coach because he can't draft and he's got a super team, which is such a disingenuous thing to say if you actually think the players are playing bad, but he's got a super team and he can't even win. It's like, well, the joke is he actually did what, in my opinion, every great coach does, which is when you have like a team with what should be good players, it's just not perform. You band-aid. You figure out like certain things like, right, you know what, I just can't do this. Let's do this. Like, even though some of the initial things were simplistic, you saw the way he was drafted. Like, I thought what he did against some of the other teams was very good. He completely fucking gapped certain people. He gave people the picks where they're supposed to be OP, but they're not actually going to be able to play that and carry on it. They're just going to be average. I thought he did a great job up to now. Like, I don't really blame him in general for what happened with Fnatic. I think you can argue in the seat split. Maybe there was some times he didn't like the draft or like letting Wunder have a Jarvan if you don't want that. But I thought in general, like, I didn't blame the coaching staff in this one. I thought like even the Fnatic players, they did power up as the series went on. In this one though, I mean, now that we've seen the game, they clearly were supposed to lose this series. They probably lose game 1 if Humanoid didn't do that fucking bonkers play in bot lane, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that giving Razork like taking away champions from Razork and having him play like more of a neutral role where he's not able to just like completely take over the games early. I think that was a good thing that Rogue was able to do, because Malrong can be a psychopath just like Razork, you know, like they can just walk around the map and just, you know, even out, whereas before it felt like Razork was really smurfing in some of the previous series. So I think that was that, which was really good. Also, I mean, I think that some Fnatic players just underperform. I mean, Hilly's just been not good.
He's had a totally shit split, a really bad one for his standards. Even in playoffs, he was bad as well, let's be real.
Well, I mean, it's just not his meta at all. Like, he is a melee player. Like, he does not play range supports that well. If you look at his entire history, the only thing that he plays that's a range support is like Thresh, which is like, nice, man. Like, Thresh is a range support. I guess it technically has range. The way that he wants to play is he wants to be able to like find openings. He wants to be able to find engages, and you know, he's playing the entire time on Yuumi. He's playing it on Nami. He's playing it on Lulu. I mean, you see how he wants to play Lulu in the game. In game 2, they have like a winning fight. He just flashes into the whole enemy team and kills himself. It's like, okay, well, I guess now we just lose the game. So
here's my question for you then. And this is a very serious question. I'm not saying it as a gotcha. I'm genuinely trying to compare, right? So if you look at a player like Larson, because obviously later we'll talk about some of the differences of what happened with him, right? Classically, just like Froggen, just like PoE, they have that label where it's like, you just play the mages. Like, if it's a mage meta, yeah, of course it's going to be good. Oh, it's a Zerkork, like, I'm sure you're going to be good now. But then the diss is, why don't you play like, you know, the Assassins and Silas? Why don't you do all this, like, back in the day, Zed, Phase, whatever it might be, all those like aggro champions. And the people will say, that proves you're not the best because you can't play the other meta, right? I have to say, after seeing this year, I actually do think Hylissang is overrated historically. And this is the reason why. Because when it is his meta, or he has the right team, he can, on those champions you're talking about, be like, I actually think, here's what's weird. On those champions, I actually think he, in most of his good seasons, would be comparable to almost the best Koreans in that style of play. You know, like if you go and bet the best Asian, like fucking Rakan player, and you get LPL or LCK, you go get the best one or Thresh. There's probably times where Hylissang's either as good or he's only one notch below, and where the other pros are like mid and they're never that close. Or ADC's obviously gapped to fuck by like Viper and all those guys, like obviously Ruler. Like I actually think in those seasons, that's essentially, this is why I think he gets overrated. I think it's actually like Humanoid. I think Humanoid showed us the same thing this year. I think what they've shown us is then it's not as extreme as they're just, but they are kind of a flip of the players where they're boring. Like if you're someone like a Mako, yeah, you are the more boring support. If you're someone like Larson, you are more boring the Humanoid, but it's a different style of play. So what do you think on that angle? Because basically I think people just ignored the laws. I mean, I will say they didn't ignore it in the sense that, don't worry, Fnatic fans in past seasons wanted for Hylissang cut, which always felt like, whoa, that's a bit too far. Like, give him one more split. But what do you think on this topic? Because obviously people are thinking just of the highs, and they sort of do forgive all his lows, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's because the highs were like so high, and domestically, I feel like he hasn't been as insane as like when you look at like Worlds. So you look at season 8 Worlds, you look at season 10 Worlds. Season 10 Worlds, I think there's an argument where he is the best support. Like him and Reckless was playing really well too. Their bot lane might have been just the best bot lane. They went to 5 games with top, almost beat them, and the bot lane was getting gapped every single game. Like Jackie Levin and Yuyanja were just getting smurfed on. So I think that that's where it comes from. If you look domestically, I don't think Hylissang has won as much as a player of his caliber should. You know, like he's played forever. He has 2 championships, I believe, in Fnatic 2018. That was it. And you know, he's been good at other points. Like he did turn it on in playoffs in 2020 leading into World. So he has good moments, but I think that there's a lot of bad moments, and I think that partly he's carried by the fact that the meta that you're referring to is like, oh, the like meta being super aggressive. That's just been the support meta most of the time.
Yes.
Like, we haven't had that many enchanter metas. Like season 7 is an example of the Ardent Censer meta, but that only really comes into play during Worlds. And then, you know, like that's a meta where I think if Hylissang was there, he's just going to struggle massively.
Dude, do you remember?
Teams.
Even though, obviously, that's the best example ever, because you remember famously, Misfits had the same exact scenario with Ignar.
Yeah.
He was at a tournament where everyone has to play the enchanted bot lanes in theory, right? And obviously, he was just hard forcing a Thresh or something like that, right?
Like
and at the time, here's what's funny, if you don't know, if you're a random casual fan who didn't remember this, yeah, loads of fans were like, what a Chad, Ignar is lol, what a legend. All the analysts, by the way, were just like, you are aware he essentially like completely limits them in draft. And that's all, even one of the reasons they didn't win that series against SKT. Like, it's a miracle they could get drafts off where they get him the way he had. And he would look good if he landed, obviously. He's only one player of the champions. But I even think that's an example of where, like, actually, other people, depending on your name, Ignar does not have the name that Hylissang does. You will be judged very differently, because I definitely agree with that. The part that's weird to me is this. I hate any argument in which you have all these players who, in isolation, they're like the GOAT of their position. And then, like, 3 of them play together in a team, and it's just not even good. It's like, yeah, there's chemistry, sure. But, like, that's the example. So if I ask everyone, like, who is the GOAT player outside of mid lane in EU, people are going to snap tell me it's Reckless, right? It's got to be. I mean, his record even would say it's him, right? They're going to say Reckless. I mean, obviously, we're not counting jungle. I mean, like the other big carry positions. Hylissang has Reckless the whole load of times. And spoiler, like most of the time, Hylissang's not the better player of the two. I would say it was an interesting fucking contrast. It was weird, but I'm with you, mate. Basically, like that's the problem. When you go back and look at some of those teams, it's like some of these teams aren't that far off the team that beats them in the final. Like they probably should get a couple of these titles, especially if these are the GOAT players, right?
Yeah, I would think that's fair to say. I mean, I think that there's also a problem here, which is like in Hylissang's like peak form, which I would say is like 2019. I mean, he's just competing against Prime G2. So even if he is like a slightly better player than Mickey X and some of those where he could get a title, it's pretty hard for him to like be able to overcome that, because that's just the best Western team we've ever seen by far. So, yeah, I mean, I think at this point it's weird, and I think you have to ask the question, like, if Worlds does not go super well, which I don't think it is. I mean, if Fnatic makes it out of group stage, they're probably just going to go into Group A, right? Or if they make it out of planes, they're going to go into Group A. Group A has EDG and T1. Maybe they get out, but it seems very unlikely. Do you end up moving on from Hylissang into somebody who's more versatile? Because, I mean, this has been the meta for a while now. Like, the whole summer split was like Nami, Lulu, Yumi. Like, there was some times where people were trying different supports, but this is what most people considered the meta for the longest time. And he just doesn't seem like he has the right mentality to play those supports. Like, he just doesn't have the vision for it. Like, he's always just looking for an angle to make a play instead of just, you know, just kind of like letting the fight flow. Like he doesn't like, you don't need to do anything when you're playing like Lulu or you just want to position well, make sure you poly the right target when he comes in and like put your shields and your ulti on the correct targets. Like it's really simplified, but it feels like he's just always looking for the like, oh, they're inting, I can like slow them here, I can flash ult, like I can get a good knockup. Like he's thinking about more of the CC than the value of the shields, and I think that's just something that he just doesn't have a good vision for as a player. Like it's hard for him to judge the value of like shields, heals, things like that, compared to CC abilities, stuns, knockups. It feels like he just doesn't properly value like the counterplay to CC.
That's why I say I think he's actually maybe a bit overrated, because the thing that I have a problem with is this. Here's what I have an issue with, right? Look, obviously, again, we're going to get to the Larson discussion later. But here's the thing. If Larson did try, as he did many times before he got good on some of these champions, to play like a non-mage champion, he's not going to just int the whole game egregiously. Like, he might just not be as impactful. He might just do an okay job. He might just not land like a perfect combo that you would if you're good on that champion. He might just do like an okay job and just do some damage, and you know what, someone else might carry the game. The problem I have with Hylissang is this, Dom. I agree with what you just said there. When he's not on his champions, he still plays like he's on fucking Pyke and Rakan. And that's the worst part, because that implies on some fucked up level he might just be like a genius savant at engage, but that's all he can do. And I find that so weird, because if people don't know, this guy was playing in season 5 in LEC, EULCS. Like, he's had a very long career, guys. That he's not an idiot, by the way. He even seems like a sort of a smart guy in his own way in real life. Like, that just suggests there's just some sort of limitation on the way he can play support. Because he's definitely put the hours in, I've no doubt. I'm sure he's practiced all these champions. They're not picking him in draft, by the way, thinking they're going to int. But dude, the way he ints on, like, to int on enchanters in the way he does, is like, mate, if there's anything that could do, is you could just be rubbish and stay alive and not die. You know what I mean? Like, that's egregious to me. To the way he ints though.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I mean, there's definitely there's reasoning I could see where like the team is not very good, so he's trying to do more than like what he's capable of, or he really thinks that people have a like bad team fight vision for like when the enemy team is stepping too far forward. So he's trying to take that onto some of himself, but sometimes you just can't do it. Like, you know, like you just can't, like you trying to do too much is actually hurting your team in a lot of these instances. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure really like where you go from Hylissang, because he clearly has clearly has a good mind for the game when he gets certain metas and certain champions. And a lot of times we've been in metas in crucial moments where those champions are good. Like outside of just, it's not just that he plays the engage, but even when he plays like Braum, for example, I think he's one of the best Braum players in LEC. Like he just has a good mind for like when to actually engage and like how much he can tank, and you know, hitting his Qs on the correct targets, making sure that he's tagging people for CCs. He's just actually really good on the that champion. He's had like obviously massively int Tom games, but I think he's actually pretty decent at Tom as well. And a lot of times you end up in a Braum meta. It's like, it was like a meme for a while where it's like, oh, Braum always just comes back for playoffs. Braum is nowhere during the entire split. Then you get into playoffs, suddenly this champion is back. And you can perform. It's very rare that we end up in a meta like we just saw where the enchanters are super OP, and part of that is because when enchanters are OP in competitive play, they're so fucking OP in solo queue, and because Riot is balancing for both, most of the time they're going to hit those champions because it's really anti-fun. Like you play against a Yuumi or you play against a Lulu, it's like one of the things that's going to kill your enjoyment for the game the most. It's like, oh, they got ahead, oh, I can't kill anyone, all right, well, I guess they just win the game, nice. Like you don't even feel outplayed. So I don't know like if this flaw that he has is a big enough one where you want to find a player that can correct it, because you're going to potentially lose out on a lot of the playmaking and a lot of the capabilities to perform in playoffs in other metas if you end up moving on from Hylissang. So I think it's pretty interesting. But I will say that he's I don't know if he's overrated. I feel like he's either super overrated or he's super underrated, depending on who you talk to. Like it feels like no one appropriately rates him. Like some people are like, he's dog shit, and then other people, he's the fucking GOAT.
Yes.
You never find like an accurate rating. It's like he's really good at this. He's also bad at this. Yeah. You know, depends on what meta he's in, and depends on like, you know, the fucking way the wind's blowing that day, because some days he just, I mean, he does still sometimes int on engaged supports. It's not like he plays perfectly on them, and sometimes he looks like the best player you've ever seen in your life in sports. So yeah, I think it's a tough discussion for sure.
Because if people don't know, I've actually been the one defending him when people wanted him cut from Fnatic on the bad splits, where for the same reason. It's like, you got to fucking look at the other splits as well. They were pretty good. Like, he made him one of the most dangerous teams in the world. So, right, I would go, let's just start talking, because here's the problem. Like, as much as like there was interesting things in the series against Fnatic, the final was just so shocking and so different from what anyone could have predicted. I think we could just spend as much time as we can on this. So let's start here, Dom. When you said earlier, one of the things you wanted to big up about Rogue was their prep. Dude, the reason I actually myself didn't think they were going to win this final, but in fact, the only angle I remember saying, the one angle I could come up with that they maybe had a chance on, is that I knew Trimby has a really big champion pool, but I don't know how that's going to apply. And spoiler, you can pick as many champions as you want if like your mid lane and ADC don't carry out and they don't outperform their other team. You're probably not going to win the series. So coming into the series, I've always said one of the things about Rogue is, like you implied earlier, game one just tells you where Rogue's at. If they're totally lost in draft in game one, oh God. If they play like passive in game one, which they usually seem to, then they're going to be behind. Like, basically in that scenario, you go like, this is a normal Rogue series. They're going to probably get 3-1 or 3-0 now. Maybe they win one game where they get like the opposite side of a matchup that's good or something. The way they started this game, even in the draft, Dom, was like, which team is this? Who the fuck is this team? If people don't know, that's the game where they drafted Renekton top, fucking LeBlanc. LeBlanc for Larson. LeBlanc isn't, by the way, LeBlanc picks get flamed when like top LeBlanc players play them in other regions. Like, it's not even supposed to be that strong a champion right now. And then in ADC, what was the one for that one? What was the one they had that game? Kalista. Like I say, mate, could you ever imagine Rogue starting a playoff series like this with this kind of a draft? This is a draft where you do if you like think you're going to smash the other team.
I mean, I think it's that, and then it's also just understanding like what their advantage was. Normally, they just misidentify what their advantage is in a series. Like, they'll just go into it, they'll be like, you know what? Like, we gotta. I mean, just look at the last series. Their mentality was, we're banning Draven. We can't play against Draven. But it's like, why do you need to ban the Flakked Draven? Sure, if he gets like a huge cash in, maybe he does something later on. But even in this game, he got an insane cash in and still wasn't enough. I feel like they just need to play skill matchups bot lane. Allow your bot lane to have the ability to fucking carry, because you saw Flakked in key moments and they were able to essentially like neutralize top side, give an advantage to bot side. Yes. And they were just picking things that made sense. I thought that the Kalista Soraka was actually kind of weird at first. But into Renata, it actually makes sense, because Renata obviously wants people to run into her. Obviously, some of your champions want to run in, but they don't all have to run in. And then if you have the Soraka, you're able to, really just take away a lot of G2's strength, because G2 is the type of team where if you even listen to their comms, they're very like, look at this guy, he's in to kill him. Like, they're very like trying to pounce on these moments. Yes. But Soraka completely warps that game where it's like, no, that guy's not killable at this point. Okay, he might be like positioning too far forward, but if you engage a fight and then you're wasting all your damage on the tank and then he's getting healed, well, the tank stats are then more effective with the heals. Like, so it felt like it just threw G2 off, because it's no longer their type of game where like, oh, if I land this like charm, it's a kill. It's like, no, that's not a kill anymore. Okay, so how do we have to play? And then what G2 would need to do is they would need to play better around objectives. They need to play better setups. They need to get on objectives first, control vision, Renata ulti through massive chokes. They need to play like that. And they just weren't able to get into that. And then I mean, if you look at the bot lane itself, like, it was 20 CS lead from Comp. I mean, part of the reason why I gave Comp MVP, because I was actually one of the people that was able to vote for Finals MVP. Okay. I just think that Comp, like, I mean, he won lane every single game. He didn't die in team fights. Like, he's almost perfect in the whole series, man. Yeah, that's like a perfect job from an AD carry. Sure, you could argue if like a mid laner pops off, they have more agency, so they should get more credit or something like that. But in this series, it just felt like there was a massive AD gap.
It was, like, put it so we'll get to Larson later, but I would actually say the player who matched up the best out of everyone was probably fucking Caps. Like, he didn't play great, but he played okay, and obviously Larson played, like, maybe slightly better, but it wasn't, like, the end of the world. So what I would say is this, by the way, as a correction, it was actually Renekton was the next game. Forget that one. That was actually Ornn they played in the first one. But the thing I would say about the game one especially is, mate, it's like you said, one of the reasons why I'm amazed more teams didn't use the Soraka is because it is another one of those champions that like Western teams fundamentally don't know how to play against it, because it's so alien compared to normal comps. Like, as you said there, the reason I actually was telling people when I was doing this watch party, like, dude, I think they're going to win a bunch of these fights, because what you would see was people on G2 would blow everything. Like, think about the genius of this. You've already got Malrang who's going to go balls deep onto G2. That looks like you caught him. It's like, holy shit, we got him in like the Cataclysm. them, and the joke is you actually didn't. You just forced yourselves into a team fight that like Rogue can win, because just at that moment, just like when you're fighting the Zillion and you forget he revives until he revives, you think, oh, we've almost got like comp, and it's like, no, you don't, because like look at the health he's going to get now, and then all of a sudden you just fucking wrecked that. There's nothing you can do. So I thought that one was insane. And by the way, I alluded to it earlier, so just for the sake of this one game, we'll go to the player himself later, but I thought in this one game, like, dude, this is a really big game for Larson in his career, to play fucking LeBlanc against Caps Azari. By the way, Caps Azari shit stomped that spring finals. Play it against that and just so fucking fire. He did, like, he even was landing like the combos and had all the like, I never expected I didn't think he would have the mechanics on it, but I thought, like, oh, you haven't played it that much in your career, surely you're not going to actually smurf. I think he's pretty good. Yeah,
I think that the LeBlanc pick was actually pretty good here because they don't have a lot of CC, so it's hard for them to like actually. I mean, that's what LeBlanc hates, is like having to look at a fight. It's like, oh, if I get hard CC'd one time here, then I'm just dead. You know, you're just never able to enter. Whereas like when they're playing there, I mean, sure, you have like the handshake from Renata, but you can react to handshake. You can react to the Renata ult. So like those are not hard CC in the context of you have a LeBlanc on your team. The other I believe it was Gwen top, right? BB played Gwen top into Ornn. Okay, so it was Gwen top. Jarvan is like something that you don't worry about as LeBlanc either. It's not like a Poppy stun or like, you know, for example, if you go LeBlanc into Poppy, you W in, you get grounded by the W, or you get flashied into a wall, you're just dead, you know? So I think that it was a good way to pick something where, because the 0 was down, right? So you want to play something that's mobile into the Ahri, so you're not susceptible to getting killed by Ahri plus Jarvan combo. So it's a good pick there. And I mean, I just feel like he doesn't have to go crazy in this game. Like I don't remember every single fight of the game, but it never felt to me like Larson had to carry the fight super hard. I felt like the key pick was the Soraka plus Kalista combo. Like it seemed like that was really good, because they would, obviously when you have Soraka, enemy team wants to engage on the Soraka, because if you don't engage on the Soraka heals everyone. But then Kalista would like ult the Soraka out, so they would engage on the Soraka would get ulted out, and then he would throw the Soraka back in, and then they would get like a CC combo off the Soraka. So yeah, I just thought that overall, just the comp from Rogue made a lot of sense. And I think
how sexy was that move as well, where comp actually used like the fucking alt weapons to go over the wall and like escape when they were caught at like the fucking near the Gromp or whatever it is. You know what I mean? The blue buff, sorry, yeah. You know that wall that they had to go over, like that was fucking slick as well. They were going to get caught. Yeah,
it was
clean
really
as fuck.
So yeah. I mean,
sorry, not the ult, whatever the thing where you throw the guy over is.
Yeah, it is the ult. So. I mean, I just thought it was good with Trimby and Comp. I think that they just really came into like, why do we need to be scared of the spotlight? Like, why? They played. That should almost give you confidence when the enemy team has to go set a Seraphine to beat you, and then you ban it out. I mean, I literally thought that G2's angle was going to be to just play Seraphine with something else.
Of course,
like just play Seraphine bot and just play and engage support, because other people have done that. Like in NA, you see that actually quite a bit, because you know, people are really bad at flanking. I think even in LEC, people are slightly better at flanking, but they're not good enough to the point where you're like, this is like really scary. You need like something to protect the Seraphine all the time. So you could play a lot of front to back fights. In the previous series, there was a lot of front to back fights, even though Rogue had the game versus Varus, where they should be flanking. It just felt like Rogue was going front to back nonstop. With the Renekton, and they were just getting eaten alive. So, yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where Rogue just came into it with a good mentality, and I'm happy that they stopped banning out their fucking good champions. That was so weird to me in the last series. Why are you banning out Jarvan when you have Malrong on your, like, he's the Jarvan guy. Yep. He's the guy that plays Jarvan when it's not meta.
Dude, the joke is, this actually happened on the watch party. Yankos did a Cataclysm, and I just went like, why the fuck would Malrang like do that move? And then they were like, dude, the Yankos is on that's the Jarvan on the other team. And I was like, that is how associated Jarvan is in my brain with Malrang. Every Jarvan, it's just Malrang. It's true. It just fits his style of play so well, doesn't it?
Yeah, and then it's also one of the champions where you could build kind of whatever the fuck you want and you'll still be useful. Like, so
which he permanently does. That goes without saying. I know, of course.
This guy, he's just look. I don't know if this guy has ever taken a mathematics class in his life, but if he did, he forgot everything from that class, because the things that he does with his item builds, it's like you realize that you're just delaying you're hurting yourself. Like every time, I wish that I could just shop for him every single time he went into the base. Like
personal shop. You need to do a video, the Malrang personal shopper, and you just like review his game. Like, this isn't right for you, Malrang. The pink ward here, it's not the look. I'm feeling, we're going more into like a gore drinker or something.
He loves the thing that's most confusing about Marog is how much he hates completed items.
Oh, he loves to do it where you just get the separate all ones for 2 items, doesn't he? Yeah.
It's like, let me just get a Bomby Cinder, and then I'm going to get an Executioner's Calling, which is like, I mean, it's like cost efficient, but it doesn't actually like help you reduce the healing. So it's like, and then he'll be like, okay, and now I'm building a stopwatch. It's like, those are 3 separate components for 3 separate items. I mean, a stopwatch can be good, obviously, but the point is, you go for these types of builds, and then by the time you complete your first build, it's like the whole point of completed items is a massive spike. Like when you combine the components, they upgrade it to something more powerful than the sum of its parts. So yeah, I mean, he's triggered to watch in that sense. But look, if you're playing Jarvan and you just throw an E down, you slow them, you know, you press W for a slow, you're providing utility, your team gets some attack speed, at least like you can do that. In terms of the gameplay, his Jarvan was really good. He played extremely well in the games, but yeah, still the shopping is tough.
I have a point I want to make on that though, which is this is why even Malrang at his peak, I don't still think he's actually like a truly elite jungler. And this is going to sound like haterism. Again, I don't give a fuck if people think this. Because Dom, I actually think he goes for all of those fucking insane flash Jarvan engages, whether he plays for Astralis or whether he plays for Rogue. And the reason I say that is this. I think one of the biggest... Because one thing I'm not good at what look like all the tactics always. But one thing I think I'm pretty good at is identifying the stylistic way teams play in all different games. And certain styles go better into other styles. Hence why like UFC's so interesting. It's not just who's the best fighter. It's what style are you fighting against, right? And I have to say, one thing about this series in particular that I thought, I've never seen this from Rogue ever, is dude, Rogue is normally the team where if you catch someone and all the other 4 could get out, they will get out, and then they reset, and then they go, right, look for another perfect angle where we can do it. Let's not go for a silly one. This game, dude, they played as though someone actually told them they get shot in the head if they don't win 3-0. Because, mate, the re-engages were fucking bonkers. Every time Malrang would go in anywhere, they all followed up. Dude, they would even do stuff by later on in the series, like remember that mad like fucking TP that like IWillDominate did bot to try and save someone? Dude, this isn't Rogue. Like they flipped a different switch in this finals. The amount of proactiveness of the team in general, as in like everyone follows it. It was like no man left behind shit. It was amazing to watch because I don't think G2 was ready for that at all, mate. You could tell they thought they would have fights or skirmishes and they're like, dude, we're winning this. They're going to sort of flee now, and it would be like an insane re-engage.
Yeah, I mean, it was really good re-engages, and I feel like G2 also like they had really poor judgment of like what contextualized the winning fight for them, and like having any type of restraint and being able to just take an objective. There's so many times where I was like, all right, G2, you've already won it. And it just felt like they were like, no, we got to fucking kill them. Where it's like, wait, you're like, you guys are the team that are supposed to be, you know, poised. You guys are supposed to have just the ability to really see the game clearly. That's one of the things of having a bunch of veterans, right? Is you're supposed to be able to control the emotions of playing in front of a stage and all the hype and the screaming and all this stuff and actually make the correct decision. And it felt like G2 just didn't have that quality at all. And that's one of the reasons why I thought G2 would win, because they have that championship quality most of the time. They're able to look at these situations, analyze them, and, you know, do the correct thing for the game. I mean, sometimes just take the Drake. Take the Drake. You've won by already forcing them out, or you've chunked this guy already. Like, you don't need to kill every single person every single time. And part of that is obviously the comps. Like, they're probably just not very comfortable against Soraka. So in game 1, you know, they don't really know what is actually breaking the threshold of a kill and what's not a kill. That's part of it. But then another part of it is they just felt like the stage got to them, which is actually really surprising considering the tenure of the players on their team.
Oh, definitely. Like, one thing I would say is very interesting. I think it was after game 1. Someone could correct me, but I'm almost certain it was after that game 1. Do you remember when they quickly cut to a shot of the G2 players when they got back to the like locker room after game 1? Mate, you know, normally the whole vibe of this team ever since 2019 is supposed to be like, we roll it off. It's just a laugh. Dude, like, Caps' face was mental. It's like they just lost the final. It was only like one of the games or something. He was like, just like doing that 1,000-yard stare. It was fucking mental. I remember just being like...
He looked like Danny. He looked like how Danny looked.
For sure, yeah. He looked checked out.
That same vibe where it's like, is something wrong? Like it's not like just a...
No, it wasn't just sad, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, or it wasn't calm or it wasn't sad. It was like, is he okay? Like, that's how you felt.
Shell shock for real, yeah. I thought so. Because everyone was saying to me, just, you know... It's just like that, you know. You just got different expressions. It's like, mate, that looked disturbing. I was almost like, has someone got wrong in scrims?
Look at him before the first game. Look at him before the first game when they're all standing there. They're all smiling, and you know, I even looked at him. I'm like, oh shit, this looks bad for Rogue. Like when you see just Caps just smiling with that like psychopath, like That fucking stare right before you get on stage, I'm like, that would be fucking terrifying for me if I was like a road.
Sure.
Like, oh no, he's just about to do some fucking shit again. He's just gonna take another championship. He's got the fucking crowd buff, you know. And then you look at him after game one, it just looked like a completely different player. And yeah, I mean, they did actually look tilted. Like if you look at, and people always just say tilted as like, oh, tilt is just you're bad, but the definition of tilt is actually that like because of your emotional state, you are now playing over aggressive. I felt like they actually were tilting in this finals. Like a lot of the plays, like a lot of the chases that they went for, it's like, where is the restraint? Like this is like, yeah, I mean, it's literally just tilt.
Yeah, if people don't know, that's the one they always, because you know, there's a lot of people even just absolutely conflate choking and tilting, but the joke is they're actually the opposite in the sense that like choking in theory for me, usually, it's not usually that you made a proactive play. Yeah, it's like you were too scared to make a play or you just second guessed yourself and you fucked it up. To me, tilt, if you don't know, tilt comes from arcade machines on pinball, where the whole thing is because they don't want you to fuck with the pinball machine because you'd be able to make the ball go and not go in the hole. If you slam the sides too much, it says tilt and it disables the pinball machine and the ball drops down and you lose automatically. So the premise is you're being like a fucking ape just like slapping the machine and they're like tilt, that's it. That's what you do when you tilt, mate. When you tilt, it's like you're just in rage mode, just going forwards as an animal and they just destroy you completely. But put it this way, tilt would be like what Humanoid and Hillsang have done in some of the games this year split. Like that's tilt for you, mate. Rogue's more the chokers. That's why I would define that. But yeah, I absolutely agree. G2 looked like that a lot of the time. In fact, they looked like they always thought they would win these fights. Because if we go to game two, mate, obviously there's only 3 games, so we'll do that and then do the bigger topics. Game 2 was insane to me, because this was the one actually where, apologies, it was the Renekton game, right? Well, if you remember, Renekton on Dom, dude, coming into this series, if you asked me what are my dream drafts in terms of people, or what I want Rogue to take, I would say I want them to take Renekton on Odoamne, because he's not going to get ahead. If he gets ahead, they're not going to play around him. It's going to be a liability, and then basically G2's going to win. Like, that's going to be the way that Broken Blade gets ahead. They're going to gank him a lot with Yankos, fuck him up under the tower early, and it's just going to be game over. Right? Not only was Odoamne okay and just fine, even at times good on the Renekton, but mate, this was the game of the insane re-engages. Like, Rogue just were unwilling to stop fights here, mate. They would just force insane re-engages over. And this was the one, if people remember, where they had the craziest comp I would ever see Rogue draft in my life, mate. Because they had Spellbook, Teleport, they had like 4 champions, because obviously they had Time Kit. They had like essentially like 4 champions with like global abilities just going around the map. Like, this was wild, dude. It allowed them to just basically do all these crazy fights. And what did you think of this game?
Well, I thought that this was actually a game where you'd be able to see more of like G2's style come out. I thought that they actually had like some advantages. And then when you look at just like the top lane matchup, right? Like, I believe that was the one where where BB was playing Aatrox, right?
Classic pick for him.
And more importantly, in the last series, that was one of the reasons why I thought the G2 won, because they were playing this Aatrox. They were letting the Renekton is supposed to be a counter pick, right? And they were letting the Renekton play into the Aatrox, and then BB was just like ahead in lane or even in lane where he should be losing or absorbing pressure from enemy jungle. But in this game, it just felt like BB like BB just was behind the entire time, and it just felt like Malrang was able to just do whatever he wanted. So I felt like this was the game where I was kind of expecting G2 to pull it back. I mean, the Jarvan pick didn't look great when Yankos played it in game 1, and I thought that this was not the easiest. This is not the easiest Jarvan game in the world in game 2 as well, because they have a lot of dashes on the enemy team. So that's normally something you don't want to play into when you're playing something like a Jarvan, but he was just able to get it done. So, I mean, hey, props to Marog. I just thought that this was probably, for me, his best game of the series. I just thought he played really well in this one. I mean, he was just able to find the angles. He was just able to, execute when he needed to. And it didn't matter if the enemy team had more movement speed or anything like that. He was able to just engage at the right times, which is crucial for Jarvan. He's hitting a lot of knockups in this game too.
Yeah, a couple of angles I would say for this particular game. This was the game where I really was just like, dude, I guess just Rogue just wins. If they win this game, they just win the series. Because if you remember, there was like a point in the mid game where G2 was looking like they were winning the fights, mate. They were looking like they're getting the better of them. It also looked like if you look at the comp that they have on Rogue, it looked like, dude, don't they just like get outscaled in a minute? Like if they sort of don't take the game by the scruff of the neck now, they probably just lose anyway, and they're not necessarily looking the best in the fights. But they then just proceeded to win just like tons of fights over and over. And this is actually the game where, as much as I memed, because obviously it was Caps who did the like back to Lysandra, and it's like, you've just been sent back to Lysandra by fucking Larson on LeBlanc, mate. I've got to say, memes aside, he actually played pretty good this game. I thought Caps actually, he did everything he fucking could. He tried. I thought this was actually not a bad one. This is like, I think overall this was the best game from G2.
Yeah, it was definitely the best game from G2.
They could have won it.
It's just like when you look at the draft, though, when I was looking at this, I'm like, this is exactly where Rogue wants G2.
Yes.
They want Caps to be playing Lysandra. Even if he plays really well on Lysandra, at the end of the day, he's playing fucking Lysandra, right?
You challenge him Flakked to carry, exactly.
Yes, and you challenge Flakked to carry, and
yeah.
Flakked had moments where he could carry. If he was a better player, he could have carried this. You know, like if he was a prime fucking Reckless or like Perks in G2 and in 2019 when he played AD carry. Like this is a game where the AD carry can actually carry, and he's just going too far forward. He doesn't know what is actually a kill and what's not a kill. I think he just didn't play as well as he could. And then also BB just had an awful Aatrox game. Like the team fighting from the Aatrox here was terrible.
Oh, he was almost invisible in this game, man.
I mean, there was a bunch of times where like he hits like a couple knockups and the whole game is just over. But
yeah, he just missed all those sword things. He just fucking missed them all somehow. I don't know how. He's a really good Aatrox player, guys. I think the finals just got to him. He just had a bad finals in general.
He had a bad finals. I mean, this is the worst he's played probably all year.
And then the other thing I would say is this, because like I say, we'll look back to some of the players. For game 3, the interesting thing about this one is this was like Rogue just went with like, finally, this is more like a Rogue draft, mate. These are just like normal champions. Yeah, these are even champions you might associate with some of the players. Like, this is actually way more like what I might want to see. So, to me, I almost feel like by game 3, the psychological war had been won. Like, look, they tried in game 3 G2, but they were nowhere close, in my opinion. Because the problem is this, like, Broken Blade, I don't know what. I know he's doing it because it's my pick, the Fiora. Like, this was such a worthless Fiora game, mate. Like it shouldn't even have been picked, in my opinion. What do you think of that?
I mean, it's supposed to counter the Aatrox. Like, it's supposed to be like a pretty good counter. I mean, look, if that's Breathe on Fiora or Bin on Fiora, if we get an LPL Fiora in this, I mean, it just is what it is. Yes. You know, I always make the joke on stream, but BB just doesn't speak enough Mandarin. That's how you play Fiora. Like it scales with your ability with your Mandarin proficiency, and he just doesn't have the Mandarin proficiency to play the champion. It just doesn't look like a pick that people can really execute in the West. It's mainly that
he's more like a Clementine level of proficiency. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah. So, okay.
Well, that's pretty good. Go on, keep going.
All right, different types of oranges. I like it. Okay, so when he was playing on the Fiora, I mean, he didn't get a lane lead. He didn't actually pick the rune for lane. So most of the time when you see Fiora into Aatrox, a lot of times they'll pick Grasp, and sometimes even what we saw in NA was that like the Aatrox will match Grasp into Fiora to try to minimize the amount of advantage that Fiora gets. So here he's going to Conqueror, which is like better in team fights, but it's worse in lane, and it's especially worse with like how you want to play versus an Aatrox. Like you don't want to end up in these massive extended trades. You just want to be annoying. You want to Q a Vital, get a Grasp proc, back off. If he tries to engage with his Qs, you parry it, you back off again. Like you just pretty much just have an answer to everything Aatrox wants to do. Your Qs are too easy in dodging the Aatrox Q. Your W is just so like you can, because Aatrox Qs are so slow, the knockups are so slow, it's so easy for you to land good parries. And here you played for team fights, and I almost never see Western Fiora players play a team fight well. It's extremely difficult. But if you get like a good grand challenge on a key target, like Fiora can team fight, which is something that a lot of people just disagree with. People will say, "Oh, Fiora's a split pushing champion." No, you can team fight. You just have to be very fucking good in the team fights. It's like when we're talking about LeBlanc, if you get CC'd once, you die. Yes, if you get polyed at the wrong time, you die. But you have an answer to it. That's the thing, is you have parry. You have an answer to those abilities, and it's all about the timing for it.
Now, you might naively think, Thorin, obviously LEC's over, LCS is over, LPL is over, LCK is over. What is there to bet on? Well, you can already get going on the World Championship for League of Legends. Look down here. You have all these teams, don't you? Playing all the planes. You can already get going with these squads. It's in a bunch of days, but you start already. Then you've also got like EU Masters Summer, whole bunch of stuff, right? if it's available when this video comes out. So there you go. You can bet on Fnatic. Got pretty good odds on a bunch of these games. Evil Geniuses, if you're an NA fan, who knows who they'll be taking at this point in time. You've got DRX, you've got Deft, one of the most legendary players of all time. You've got Xiaohu, the reigning world, MSI champions of RNG. You've got Mad Lions, Not Humanoid, Niski, Kaiser, El Yoya. So there's some big games there. I'd go and look, because some of them actually you can get pretty good odds on the side of the team that you probably want to put the cash on, right? You can get some pretty good ones if you really believe in them. Like Dragon X 3.0 against RNG. You know what? I think RNG's probably a better team. But listen, mate, bot lane meta, I don't know if Kaiser will be around at this point in time. I think I'll put 500 on this. And obviously, Mad Lions and Fnatic, if you're a European fan, back to the show. Right. I think what we do now is I want to talk about some of the specific players, but obviously let's talk about them over the whole series. Right, the obvious name I'm going to go to, and it's not to diss him, it's not even supposed to be a dunk. Like, I actually think within context, this was about the best he could have done for the way the game was caught. Right, let's do the Flakked conversation. Here's how it starts, Dom. Miss me every fan on Twitter going, he was still doing all right damage. He was doing okay. The whole game was set up as though he was Uzi I, motherfucker. He was supposed to be the MVP of this series if they win. That is how they set the game up. As you said, in game 2, that's why I hate the Lissandra. It's not that Caps can't play. It's not they couldn't play to win. He can't play to win if he's got fucking Flakked as ADC on a carry champ, mate. That ain't happening. And so, in general, this series is almost like they came in thinking like G2 came in thinking we'll be the ones who do like the different draft, and they'll never expect us to play through bots or watch this. And Nate, it was fucking whack. Like, they gave him 3 dude, he even got Rogue even gave him the Zeri in the last game. Just like, you know what, motherfucker? Take the most OP ADC in the game and see if you can do anything. You can't, we'll take the trophy. Like, it's not I'm hating on Flakked, I'm actually hating on G2 in a way. The coaches, I don't know why they put me in this position. Because if you're us and we've spent the whole year pointing out, like, obviously people like Upset and Comp and these guys are way better than him. All the haters are like, no, but he does his job in top. Yeah, you didn't let him do his job this time. You actually, what you did basically is you threw him in the deep end when he's not a really good swimmer and he drowned.
Well, I mean, he's
just peddled water, whatever. He is Ghost from Damn One back in the day, yeah.
He's Ghost. That's how you want to play with him. You want him to neutralize the lane. You want to give him key abilities in team fights. You don't want him to have to make like the micro decisions in the fight where it's like, how many like autos am I going to get off here? Or like, can I actually go forward? Like, did they use enough cooldowns? Like, that's what makes a super elite AD carry. When you look at somebody like Viper, you look at somebody like Ruler right now, the ability for their like brains or their cognitive ability to just look at every single skill shot and be able to like time, like they'll see 5 at the same time and they'll just instantly be like, okay, those 5 are down. It's like, and what's the next one? And then they'll see, oh, this 6th one just came in and now I can go forward and just like flash it to a team fight and take it over. They're so good at having that ability. And that's something that if you're a newer player, it's just difficult, you know, to under pressure, be able to find these openings is really tough.
Oh, he's still a rookie, let's be real. It's his first year in LEC. That's also why I thought it was a bit rough, just this draft in general, mate, because if there's one player I would say he's going to obviously be gapped by, you said it earlier, it's going to be ADC. That goes without saying, mate.
Yeah, I mean, AD carry and support. I mean, I feel like in this series, Targamas was also, you know, worse than Trimby. I think Trimby played extremely well. And part of it is, yeah, they're just not great in lane. Like, you give them lanes. I mean, it's not like so Renata is not supposed to be good into Soraka, but it's mainly just like the concept of the champions. Like, you can kill this lane. Like, you are playing Draven Renata. If you get a good flash handshake onto somebody, you can try to like force sums, you can like play aggressively. It feels like G2 just doesn't do that. You know, like the way that they've gotten by is, hey, just don't lose bot, be stable, and then group up with the team and we'll win. That's been, or like Targamas will go roam and Flakked just don't die. You know, like that's how they want.
There was no roam timings in any of these games because it was that they were never fucking up in lane when they done like he never could. Everyone says, like, I agree, when he's on roam he looks like one of the great supports in the future. Like, he's gonna have a great career, but he can never be unleashed. That's the thing people are forgetting, Dom, from back in season 9. The reason season 9 was so interesting was like you had to unlock the support to then take over and help the mid and then open the whole map. Like, if you couldn't ever get them out of lane, then having Hillsang doesn't help. He's just stuck in lane, isn't he?
I mean, I would just say that like it's also just the champions that you're playing. You're playing Karma. Like, what did he play? He played a game of Karma, a game of Renata, and a game of Soraka. Like, what are you roaming? What are you doing if you're trying to roam on those champions? So it's like,
true.
That's why I thought that an angle could have been pull out like a Seraphine Nautilus, pull out something to unleash the support, have your support move around the map, try to make plays because that's what G2's strong at. Ban out the key champions that you think are going to make this impossible. So ban out if you think Yuumi makes this impossible, ban it out. If you think Lulu makes it impossible, ban it out. That's fine. And just like allow yourselves to play with the same identity that you did in the last series, because that's when G2 looked their best, right? Neutralize bot lane. Doesn't matter what happens on the other side of the map. You'll just show up in team fights, cast your Seraphine ult, press W, help everyone else, and you'll win just like that. So for me, it just seemed like by the last game, I mean, they just didn't even know who they were anymore. It's like, okay, so we have this like Ahri pick, okay, but then we have a Fiora, okay, so we have pretty weak team fights, but we also like don't have really winning lane from the mid lane because you're playing Ahri into Azir. And then we have like a Soraka on our team, so like the Soraka wants to get into the team fights, but that's not even what it just seemed like it was all over the place. They just didn't know what to do anymore. They completely collapsed in this. So, I mean, I would say that I don't know if I would say G2 choked the series, because it seemed like Rogue just played well. It felt like G2 just expected Rogue to choke, honestly. They kind of bought into the narratives of, oh, this is like Rogue can't play when it matters. We'll just play solid, and if we play solid, we'll win because we're better.
Here's the thing, though. That's not actually as silly as when you're saying it as you might think, because here's the thing. If people don't know, this is aged fucking so well. But I've always said the reason I don't totally give up on Rogue, not that I said did win, but I don't give up on the idea. You notice I always argue the idea that like regular season games matter for something. It shows something about them as a team. Like if they can ever just play like that in the playoff, blah, blah, blah. Because everyone tries to do that thing of like, who cares about regular season? Like, I'm sorry, if you're like the greatest player of all time, you don't just have whack regular seasons all the time and then only win in the playoffs. That doesn't exist. The greatest of all time is pretty good in more, probably the best player in the playoffs, in the regular season and the playoffs. That's what Michael Jordan's like, mate. He just take 30 games off and just dick around and then come back. He just dominates you every time he can. So to me, what that
35 points a game for a season.
So to me, like what that suggests is Rogue can do it when there's no pressure. Now, obviously, look, if you want to talk about the GOATs, that's not worth too much, mate. You have to eventually do it in the playoffs. But to me, it was always like, they're going to break through eventually if they keep playing like this. If they keep having these good splits, if they keep having these good players, like sooner or later, people are going to fix things are going to tweak. And so if you don't know the analogy in Counter-Strike, people don't, it's probably the craziest story of all time. Imagine this analogy. I'll give you the league analogy. Imagine those years where Rock's Tigers used to be first every LCK split, and then they only won the one time where Score and KT took rid of SKT for them. They never had to beat SKT, and then they won one time ever, didn't win Worlds, that's it. That's all they got out of it. They got like basically one LCK title, and that's kind of whack because they could have been one of the greatest teams of all time. Now imagine they never broke up though, Dom. Imagine they'd played for like 3 more years with the same lineup, and suddenly in the next years, they break through a couple of times and they win. And then you know what? Next time they win Worlds 2 years later. And by the end of it, right, they've made their dynasty so that like the seconds and are pretty good because they've also got the firsts and all the championships as well. And they would then, for real, they could have been like a contender for like greatest team of all time. That happened in Counter-Strike. The core of this team that was Astralis used to be the team that if it wasn't the big tournament, they would win over all the other teams. But when it was, because essentially we don't have leagues, we have tournaments instead of the circuit. But when it would be the big tournament with the big money and the major, like all the pressure, they were like guaranteed to lose. In fact, they could even occasionally lose to a much worse team, but and obviously their rivals would beat them. Now, what was insane about that was every fan can only see what you are now because they just like watch what's on the screen and see the score. So they used to go like, they'll never win. And I was always like, bro, they're this close. Like, imagine they ever activate in that way. It's over. And that is actually what happened. They got like a slightly different set of players but they essentially became the greatest team of all time and created like the most insane Counter-Strike dynasty probably ever in history. Now, I'm not saying Rogue is going to do that, but I do, by the way, as an interesting thing about this final, think this does imply that they're in the mix for the next 2 titles if they keep the same lineup, and they're going to certainly be a strong team. And it does feel like the way that they won maybe broke some of the issues that they had. And I think the key thing for me overall is this. This is sort of what I've always wanted them to have, which is you could still play loads of games with like the boring style and just pick the standard pick. That's fine. That's what wins you loads of best of ones. But they never had this 5th gear. They never had drafts like game 1 and game 2 of this series and playing like game 2, mate. This is where you've got to have that extra notch, and that's what I've seen change in Rogue. Like I think this finals especially was like the fucking birth of a potentially great team.
Yeah, I mean, I think that also they didn't have to play under the same pressure they normally have to play under. I think that that's like actually a huge thing because people will try to make it seem like, oh, it's a finals, every finals is equal. But there's a difference between going in as a massive favorite where you're just expected to win and going in like they did recently. And if you hear I mean, if you hear everyone's counting them out, right? Like, so pretty much like they don't have, I mean, if Rogue lost this, I wouldn't have said they choked because they didn't have a good regular season.
The reason I got those odds was because not only did the odds makers set it, but then obviously everyone put all their money on G2 and Fnatic. That's how I got the dude. Even Fnatic, I got like 2.6 or something on. That's impossible. How could it be that? But it was. Everyone thought Rogue had chokers. Fnatic at least has some clutch play. Yeah, the odds it was. No one. The money tells you no one's ever believed in Rogue less ever. Normally they're like, oh, but even if they're underdog, Dom, they'd be like, you know, the 40-60 underdog, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Rogue in general, when you look at the team, like, look, I mean, people were memeing it the whole time. It's like, you can't choke if you're bad. You can't choke if you're actually losing in regular season.
Yeah.
So it's like they almost relieved their pressure by not being front runners. Every single other time they'd been a front runner for the most of the split. Like they're number one in regular season. They're expected to do well. I mean, the series versus Mad, the first best of 5 they played, they were expected to win that by most people's estimation. So I think that's something that people are missing, or even the players seem like they're missing it.
Yes.
From a lot of like the interviews and stuff. Like I hear like these weird things where, like, I mean, Odo had the tweet or the interview where he's like, oh, like, how come when we lose we're chokers, and when we beat Fnatic are not chokers? It's like, well, because Fnatic, like, no one believe, like, in order to be a choker you need to actually have people believe in you. And when Fnatic is like barely making fucking playoffs, they're not expected to win. They're not expected to actually do well. Whereas like when Rogue is consistently like first place, then you have expectations that they're going to perform. And it's not even just the standings and stuff like that. It's the actual gameplay. Like when Rogue lost that final in spring, they didn't play like themselves at all. It wasn't like G2 just played amazing and Rogue played at their best, but G2 was just better. It was like G2 played well and Rogue just made so many uncharacteristic mistakes. Like whenever the tide shifted at all into their favor, they would like instantly lose. They would just make a bad play and instantly lose. They're the game right there. So for me, it's just, I mean, Rogue obviously won. I don't know if they if I view it as like, oh, they overcame choking. I think that they actually just played with a lot less pressure than they normally put on themselves. Like maybe they're a team that is better at not being front runners. Like maybe they should change the way that they scrim, because they actually were losing a ton of scrims beforehand. If you listen to like what Odo
20%
said, I mean,
win rate, right?
20% win rate. I actually heard it was worse than that. Maybe I have bad information. I heard that they won. Let me actually check.
I think I just saw a headline that said that. So
let me check real quick.
I think it was even worse. I think it was like 20% since like week 8 of the split, or some mental stat like that. There was some line someone had.
So I heard that they were 7 wins and 67 losses in scrims.
Okay.
Which means that you're losing like 4 to 5 games every single.
Dude, you know something mad about that? Here's a weird way my brain instantly interprets that since they won. That might even be why the team that arrived at the finals was unrecognizable from normal Rogue. Because think about what normally happens, Dom. Supposedly they are a pretty good scrim team, if not one of the best in the LEC for all these past splits. Well, the problem with that is it will absolutely give you all the fake confidence in all your drafts and everything you're doing. Whereas instead, if you play 1 billion scrims, this is why I believe also, by the way, people like G2 famously, the super team, could sometimes have bad scrims against Asians and then beat them. What it also shows you is, don't go with your original read. In fact, all these billion losses are showing you what doesn't work for you, and you just keep looking for something else, something else, find something else, and it's just going to push you. If you had enough scrims, essentially, one day you would arrive at like a comp that works. It would just happen, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's not like you go into scrims now. It's like, oh, well, we try to lose the scrims.
No, of course not.
You scrim in a different way. You scrim like to try to get better at different things, and when you already have a pretty good grasp on a concept, you don't keep on playing it until you hit the like 10th degree of it. You're like, okay, like, yes, we trust our ability to play that. What are other iterations that we can play that fit into our playstyle? Because I think that that's something that they did well here, is they're honest with what their playstyle is. Where in other splits, it felt like they were just super dishonest with what, like, who they are as players, you know? Like, you know what Odo's good on. Look at what he played this series. He's not playing some fucking crazy picks. He's not playing Fiora and Gwen and like all this random shit. What is he playing? He's playing Aatrox, Renekton, Ornn. Yes. Like, even though Larson has the LeBlanc game, like, sure, like, I'm not saying you can never pick a champion that is not like a mage, but he picks it in a really good situation. He doesn't pick it in a game where it's like a 50-50, where it's, oh, if you really pop off, you can do it, but it's a hard game. You know, like, you're more honest with what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. and they came out with better drafts because they're not trying to be too smart. And part of it, I think that was really telling. I listened to Larson talk about it on Euphoria. He was talking about the Senna Seraphine draft where they were thinking about the draft as like, oh well, Freddie prepped 1 million drafts, but they just never we just never had a draft prep that actually was into Senna Seraphine, which is like, I don't even think that that's the right way that you should be conceptualizing drafts. You should not be thinking about like what exact champions. You should be just thinking about your style, their style, and like plug and playing things into it, because then I feel like then you'll be able to answer a lot more things. You can never know exactly what the enemy team is going to draft. I mean, sure, like sometimes you can get lucky, but most of the time I think that it's better to just like understand who your team is, who the enemy team is, and just funnel like the what's happening on the stage into like what your read of the games are. Obviously you can take information from the games that are played in front of you, but instead of it just being like, oh, we didn't know what to do against Senna Seraphine, it's more just like, what do we want? We want to have a aggressive winning bot lane.
Yes.
We want to win bot because their bot lane is weak. Targamas and Flakked are bad in laning. Bad at laning. We are good at laning. Like, so how are we going to manipulate this to our advantage? So then if something like a Senna Seraphine catches you off guard, you at least don't run it back in another game. At least at that point, you're like, okay, that's something that neutralizes what we do. Remove that and then try to force them back into like your game plan. Like, you want to force the enemy team into your game plan, and that's what they did in the series. Like, most of the games are Rogue games. Like, those are the games that Rogue wants to be playing. They want to be playing a game where they get like the Jarvan pick into Trundle, and they have like the winning bot lane, they have pressure, all that stuff.
Thing is, though, I'll just bring it back a sec. I'll disagree, though, on the point where you say about like not overcoming the choking angle. Because here's the thing: in my opinion, the idea that they just like straight up choke always, I do think that sort of died in the upper bracket final against Fnatic in spring. I do think that sort of killed that, or at least it made them believe like we don't have to choke or whatever. In the final, I agree, they just played absolute shit, and I also think they got completely draft gap and weren't even prepared for what G2 was going to do. Like, they didn't know that Ari was just going to smurf the whole series, for example. They didn't even think that through. Then in this particular upper bracket where they lost to G2, this one they just played really poorly and they utterly drafted themselves to shit like that. And also G2 smurfed on some champions. So as a result, like that one, I also don't think's choking. I think they fundamentally weren't as good in that series, and they had no business to. If you look at the way the draft went. But the difference is, in this final, it's not that they like overcame the choke overall. Like I'm saying, I think they've sort of gradually started to do that. They might still have a tendency to do it. We'll see in a future year. But the key thing is, though, to win like this, and especially against Caps, G2, all that, that's why I was making the analogy about the Astralis one before. I've always thought another thing that happens to the teams that get tortured and could be number one, but they keep being number 3, number 4, and they never get like the win, is it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You've just lost so many times. Something inside your brain's like, what's going to go wrong now? Or you win, you get up 2 games, it's like, no, they're only going to bloody probably make the same 5. Like I've always said, the difference between a winner and a loser is this. A winner goes up 2 games and they're starting to lose game 3 and they go, let's fucking close this shit now. A loser goes like, we got game 4. That's, as soon as you do that in your mind, you are dead. Like that thinking right there will kill you. Because the amount of times I've seen underdogs be up in series and they were looking like they were going to win, and it goes to game 5 and it's actually just the other team sweeps back, or the other team wins the clean game 5 and it was 1-1, 2-2, and then the other team wins. Like that happens so many times. So to me, the way that they won and how emphatically they won, there's not really any reason that they should like choke in beyond just have a bad game or something. Like I feel like in theory, this win could be the one that breaks them through. Like, wow, if you were Rogue and the next split started tomorrow, you'd be confident as fuck in the next split.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like, I'm not saying that they haven't like kind of released the pressure on themselves, like in terms of that. I'm just thinking that like this is not, if they lost,
to make them super clutch if you go the opposite way, right?
Well, I mean,
I agree with you. Also, G2 was supposed to win, of course, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is not to them where like they were in a position where they could have choked. I don't think you can choke here. I think that like fair. choking is dependent on what your position within like the league is. So normally, if you're an underdog, you're just not choking by losing, you just lost.
Yes. I mean, so, like I said before, the choke would have been if they'd lost 3-0 to Fnatic in that spring upper bracket final, right?
Yeah, that would have been a choke. I mean, it's even just the way that the games go. I think more about that. Like the thing about Rogue is you can tell some series they're mentally checked out at a certain point, and you could see that in the G2 upper bracket series. Like I'm not sure if that's a choke, like, but my point is that like when you look at that series, every single time that they get an advantage, they instantly like do something dumb where they just lose it instantly. Whereas, you know, if you're a solid team. Like you make the enemy team work for that, or you close out some of those games when you're ahead. So I think that Rogue is like, I don't even know if like I'm arguing choking. It's more that I just think that they are like a fragile team. Like when there starts being a ton of pressure on certain moments, I don't know if like they're going to pull it out in those moments most of the time. I think here they were able to do it, but I think that historically...
What about for the whole playoff run, though? Because here's the thing. I agree, the G2 series was crap, the upper bracket one. But if you look overall, like, obviously... they had the Mad Lions win. Dude, some people thought Mad Lions were going to win the playoffs. They had Mad Lions win.
We didn't, but some people
I know,
did,
I know, it's true. Some people. They had the Fnatic one, obviously, which was a very different type of series. You had sort of three totally different... all three series were totally different, and the opponents were all the best. Like, does winning against all the best, does that in some ways... essentially, it sounds like you're still pulling back. Like, you're... here, I'll put it together. From what you're saying, it sounds like if next split, Rogue comes along, and they're like second in wins, and then they go to the playoffs... if there's a really dominant team, you're going to pick the dominant team and not Rogue.
No, that's not. It's actually it's just if they're the dominant team. That's
okay. That's the final test then, because I like the way you have kept moving the test along. It's like here's the beginner's test. You passed that now. Okay, you're making finals. That's cool. And then you're like, okay, right, can I get my license? No. You have to be able to drive. Right now, there's the intermediate test. What happens if you're in a sticky situation? What happens if someone pulls the brake or someone swerves in front? Right? Okay. You crashed a few times, but you finally got that. Okay, there's your intermediate one. And then like, all right, surely now I can just go and drive.
Well, no, I mean,
then Dom's like, no, get in this Formula One car, and you have to win Formula One, like World Championship. If you do that, you're the greatest driver of all time, and there's your license. Like, I'm making hyperbole, obviously, but you sort of still holding one thing back, right?
It's essentially just the way that I view choking is not just like, did you win or you lose a clutch moment.
Yes.
Like the way that I view choking is, are you expected to win or are you expected to lose going into it?
So dude, I'll give you the best example ever. You know, here's the thing. I think this is egregious as fuck. There's two players that were called chokers a long time. Odoamne and Jankos, right? You know this. Here's the difference. Go look at Jankos's teams, right? He has a few years, like H2K, where maybe, Odo's in that team as well. He has a few years where maybe they're supposed to win. It's really once he gets to and then maybe in G2, you could argue the rosters are comparable, maybe whatever. Like, I think that one was more like, it was hit and miss, especially because he was a jungler. I think people just didn't know how you judge the game. Like, if your team loses the semi-finals 3-0, good luck looking fucking amazing as a jungler. Like, I'd have to get you to do like the 5-hour VOD review to really know if you choked or whether you just like, got behind, you got gapped in the jungle. There's a million factors that can happen. The Odo one I always thought was a bit whack because I do think he individually has bad games sometimes in a series. But you look at the early part of his career, mate. You know when he was on the bad H2Ks? Semis was the best they could have done, bro. They were never supposed to be in the final against like Fnatic back then. Like, you know what I mean? Those teams were like, remember he had like fucking Hjarnan as his ADC. He had fucking Kasing as his support. These aren't bad players, but they weren't like the beasts. It's not like Forgiven and Reckless. Like, I think some of those ones are mad.
Yeah.
And then obviously people are going to count like when he's on teams like Schalke and stuff. Again, they're not supposed to. If him and Upset make like a semi, bro, they already did their job at that point. They're not supposed to win and go that's not a choke.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think that this is like, I guess the more I think about it, this is a distinction, right? I think that Rogue performed under pressure. Like, yes. But I don't think that performing under pressure or being like clutch in a situation is necessarily the opposite of choking. Like, I think you can be clutch when people don't believe in you, right? And I think if people don't believe in you, it gives you a completely different vibe as a competitor going into a series, because it's like, oh, there's like nothing to lose, right? Like you go into that final, everyone's saying, yeah, Rogue is gonna get shit on. They're gonna get 3-0'd, right? So then like you go in with a different mentality as a competitor than if you're the favorite and it's like, yeah, like, so I mean, if you're gonna say like, so for example, if G2 like choked in some of games here, like they actually just played worse than themselves with the pressure, I think that would be more acceptable. Like Rogue beat a team that was choking, but I don't think that means that like Rogue didn't choke.
There's another thing. I also will say this. I also don't think G2 choked the final. I actually think a bunch of players had bad games. I think they drafted appallingly after the first game. And I think basically the whole game plan was very silly. And I also will add, I think they were absolutely sort of like sucker punched in the face by the first games. And they were like, what the... We didn't even have... They were in the Freddy 1-2-2 scenarios. Like, look, we ran the Doctor Strange of everything that could happen, and none of these were in there. Like, fucking hell, we down 2-0. Like, I actually think if you look at Game 2 and Game 3, G2 played okay in these games, or even good at times.
Yeah, I think Game 3 was I mean, it's weird, right? Because, like, Jankos, I think, had some, like, really weird games for him. Like, where was the Jankos that's going to, like, get a kill in the early game? Like, there was just almost no advantages. So like they're playing situations where you think like, okay, you have like Lissandra plus a Trundle, you're going to be able to get some type of advantage at some point. You're going to be able to find a kill at some point, but you're just really not getting these early game leads. And then I just feel like G2 kind of misevaluated their own strength on certain picks because other teams were banning it, right? So because other teams didn't want to play into Flakked Draven, they're like, that's one of our picks, like Flakked Draven, that's how we win. But it's like, no, like that's, even though like other teams are banning it, that doesn't mean that you then think, oh, I'm super strong on this pick. It's more like, I think that they don't really understand like what our strengths and our weaknesses are. And you take the free ban, but you don't actually have to opt into like, well, now that it's up, we have to fucking pick it.
Yes.
You know, you can kind of be more tame and more realistic with, even if a team gives it to us, that still is not our strength. We should still stick to our guns and be looking to play weak side bot laners. Like we want to essentially just neutralize the bot lane and still win hard through top.
And I've got to say, the draft of G2 on the bans for game 3 is like the craziest fucking surrender I've ever seen. First of all, because he has one good game on it, Odo has now gone from liability on Renekton to I must ban it against him. I don't even know if that's necessary, guys. And then secondly, it's like they just decided, you know what, actually, fuck you, Flakked. We're going to make Comp the MVP. We're going to ban 4 ADCs against him, but give him the Sivir. And then even on that, he's going to carry like no, it's this one of these bans, I know.
Yeah, it was rough.
I would have been tempted, by the way, I know hindsight it's 2020, but I would have been tempted to waste some bans maybe more on like fucking junglers or something, mate. Get Malrang onto some stupid shit. Let's see what happens to the series then, you know.
Yeah, I mean, he looked bad on the Vi game that he played in game 1 versus Fnatic,
Exactly.
so I feel like he was really comfortable on Jarvan, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure what G2's best angle was. What I said earlier, I still stand by, which is I think that they should have tried to like force the Seraphine. I think they should have tried to force the like weak side bot. Like we are going to weak side bot lane. It doesn't matter if you have Caitlyn, doesn't matter if you get fucking Sivir Lulu. We're going to just put a Seraphine bot lane and we are going to try to win through top side.
Just in case people don't get it, obviously these were never banned. They could have just picked this at any time they wanted.
Well, it's like Senna was banned, and they're like, all right, that's like our Senna Seraphine lane gone. But like Seraphine still exists.
Oh, you can play it without Senna as well. Come on.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that would be a better angle. Like just force yourself into your own like into things that make sense. I mean, even if you want to weak side bot lane, I mean, you could also try different things. You can try to ban one of the ADs. So you ban Zeri, and then you play Sivir. And if they go Caitlyn, like I think that game was fine, just run it back again. Like I would have been more willing to opt into that than to opt into the Sivir Zeri trade, because Caitlyn's just not that good of a fucking pick. Like Caitlyn Tom Kench, like the Caitlyn had to take TP. They actually were able to get pressure in the lane.
They should have had lane fucked, exactly.
Yeah, so I think that would have been a better angle as well.
And by the way, there's another thing. If you're a Flakked fan, do you have any idea how disrespectful to draft that in as comp in the bot lane is? What you're saying there is, you're barely even an ADC. I'll just start a summoner behind and you can't even kill me early game. That's fucking crazy, dude.
Yeah, I mean, or just get it like a CS. I mean, they should just be like taking plates. I mean, it's Sivir Karma into Kate, Tom Kench. Tom Kench, I did not like the Tom Kench pick there for Rogue, really. It felt like it was just too much on, we're going to, it's like good into Lissandra, but I mean, I think you're dooming yourselves in lane. I mean, maybe it's okay, because I guess their read is that Flakked and Targamas are so bad in lane, they won't be able to punish it. So we'll just pick something that's like good outside of lane. But I think it's almost like too disrespectful, or just like too useless almost, because I mean, at a certain point, Lissandra is no longer ulting targets to get picks. At a certain point, Lissandra is going in, Wing, ulting herself, then Zanya'ing, and then you're trying to win the fight like that. It's just trying to buy space. And I mean, Tom Kench doesn't do much to Sivir super late game. And you even saw at a point in this game before Jankos walked up mid and got caught in game number 2. You saw the like Sivir come back. I mean, G2 almost ended the game in game number 2. So,
by the way, that's one thing I'd forgotten even. Dude, go back and watch that, because you remember what happens is there's sort of like, I think there's like 3 G2, there's 3 I think Rogue. No, I think there was only two. I think it was like Malrang and someone else, right? If you remember, this is where, dude, Malrang actually can be like a savant sometimes. Because if you remember, they're all going onto the Nexus towers, right? The G2 players. And instead of what every other Jarvan would do, which is just go onto them and do all your combo and do everything to like stop it for a second. But if you did that, you would stop them for a second and then they'd just delete you instantly and they'd win the game. He just did it where he just like drew people away and just like made people fight off him and ran away and forced them to like run away to the edge of the base. And like actually just play like a distraction, completely bought them the time to get like another person up on the fountain or something. Like this is like a good example of like even like you can't even just say you only engaged. Like that was like smart, mate. Dude, that's like sort of some fucking lateral thinking right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in this situation, I think G2 actually should have just tried to force end.
They probably could have just hit the towers in the base, right? Just ignore the champions, yeah.
Even though Marong ended up killing part of the wave, like the wave actually was close enough that it removed the debuff on the turret, and if the debuff's removed, you just like all commit one shot. Right. Caps had ult in like 2 seconds. People were still not spotting like even once when the Nexus turret, the first turret goes down, they feel panicked because of the situation and comp's still up. Trimby is dead for 10 seconds. Yep. Larson is dead for 14, and Odo's dead for 16. That is an eternity at that point.
It's crazy,
like that's super. So I think that G2 actually could have ended here. And this is another example where G2 was just making the wrong calls in a lot of these like clutch moments under pressure, which is what you'd give them the credit for being able to do. So, yeah, I mean, I think it was definitely clutch by Marl. I mean, I think going for the wave is like, I think in later years, people have gotten better at this concept of just like, just suicide for the way of like stall out the game. I think people are smarter about it now than they used to be. But that being said, like it just was, it was well played. I mean, imagine if Rogue lose that game and then they go on to lose the series. Imagine the choking fucking memes then. Because like that's the other part is it's also based on game state. It's not just based on win or lose, pressure or no pressure. It's like, were you ahead and then you threw? Like, are you ahead in terms of just like you're supposed to be the better team and then you lose? Like those are the things that I really evaluate there. So I don't even care that much about choking. I just think that it's weird that was like something that was just like thrown out. It was like, but like how come when Rogue wins or like when Rogue loses they choke, but when Fnatic loses then Fnatic didn't choke? It's not just loser chokes. Like I don't know. I just felt like that was just a weird like narrative that was being pushed around. It's like, I mean, Fnatic was like, I mean, they didn't set themselves at a standard where you felt like, oh shit, this team like is good. Sure, they're like a super team on paper, same way Vitality was. But I mean, look at like we watched the whole fucking split. Like the whole split was bad. Like the whole split was bad. It's almost like I would say Fnatic overperformed. Like going into
playoffs. That's what I was kind of saying earlier. They did everything they could.
Yeah, they did perform better in playoffs than they were. Than what they were doing before. I mean, they were really playing bad.
I mean, remember they even almost in the first round they almost did lose to XL, but they sort of looked all right, you know. Yeah. I think that, like I said, I think every series they got better, and then the problem was it just turned out Rogue was better as well once they got to that last match. Right? What about this then? Go on.
Well, I think that Upset actually had like a pretty weird series. I mean, he had some like really egregious like just go into the whole enemy team and int where it was like I felt like he was trying to do too much, but
luckily for him, he had Hillisang and Humanoid on his team, so.
Yeah, I mean, still, there was points in the game where it's like you could pop off here, like you could go into fucking prime Uzi mode and carry some of these games, or at least you don't have to lose to the point that he lost to, you know, like or the point where he would lose his advantage. But yeah, I mean, I think that Fnatic has been bad the entire year at setting up objectives and forcing the enemy team into good fights and controlling vision and like doing the correct things. It feels like they have no concept of how to do that. So as soon as Rogue was able to like get through the early game, which they did after they banned the Sylas, I think that was just, I mean, they were just able to do the things that they're good at. And especially if you just look at both players historically, that is what Larson is better at. Like Larson is good at like playing control mages, and part of playing control mages is like knowing how to like use your abilities to zone off key points in the map. Like knowing what locations to use your abilities is way more important than like hitting a crucial skill shot. Whereas, you know, the reason why people like Sylas and Ahri and those types of picks is like they're gonna like go in and like hit a nice charm or hit a nice chain, and that's gonna determine whether they win or lose the fight. The thing that Larson was really good at is they can't walk through here. Like I'm playing Azir, this choke is ours. Set up behind me. I'm not letting them walk through here. Or like they just like went through this choke. Like I'm going to throw all my AoE abilities and chunk this guy out. Like just being able to control spaces on the map is Larson's biggest strength.
That's why he's an Orianna player, isn't it? That's exactly the game of an Orianna player. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's an Orianna player, an Azir player, a Victor player. It's similar skill set, which is a good skill set. And those champions also have the ability to win lane in a lot of these matchups. So it's able to, it's both of his best skills. He's good at laning. He's also good at team fighting. I mean, I even think that when he plays things like Sylas, Akali, whatever, he's actually fine at the laning portion of it. It's just that like when things get really chaotic, being able to like judge the timings to go in, I feel like that's the those windows, like I think he just doesn't see them as well as other players. But yeah, I mean, I think in that series, that's what like Rogue was just able to force Fnatic to play their game. They look so much better when they force the enemy team to play their game instead of just like opting into like, oh, we have to try to be a team that we're not. Like the team that Rogue is, just make them beat you at your best. Make them beat your control mages. Make them beat your Victor, your Orianna, your Azir, that type of stuff.
Right, one thing I do want to bring up, because it would be remiss not to talk about, and I noticed so many fucking shows just missed this topic entirely. How are y'all going to tell me Caps is the Western GOAT? And you know, this is where I hate fans with a fucking burning passion, Dom. Because right up until this final, everyone would have told me Caps is at the best of his career. He is the absolute zenith that Caps has ever been. Because even if, say, like 2020 summer or something, I think he was like fucking sick then or whatever. I'm thinking.
Yeah, I thought he was better then, personally.
I agree then. But like, a lot of people would say after the playoffs onwards in spring, he's been incredible. I even think actually when G2 was shit in the middle, in the summer season in the middle, he actually was the only one who would even have good games. He just couldn't drag them over the line, and the rest of them were just inting away. So a lot of people, because they use the logic like, the older you are and the more you win, the better you are. You know, they still say it about LeBron and fucking Brady, but it's so insane. It's like, and your mind if you think they're in their peaks. Like, you know, their physical peak was about 12 years ago, and they're probably, the sweet spot was probably like 7 years ago. You know, like, it's just the way sports work. But they're doing the thing of like, they're making it sound like you're a chess player, and you just gain more experience and knowledge, and you become like a mega brain, right? So the problem I have with this topic is this. I agree. I actually personally think the best ever Caps was summer 2020 because he had a super team still, but also he actually did get all the int out of his game, and it was just the fucking claps. It was just fucking sick, just over and over and over. And by the way, logically,
teammates weren't playing that well that split either.
No, that was the one where they weren't supposed to win, mate. Like he just made them win that
his
one.
Father died.
Yes,
he took time off. And he played like poorly.
He had to get himself back into form. Exactly. That was just Caps winning that. But the problem is, this is still supposed to be one of his great years. And I would, except for the first part of the spring, and I would say, yeah, he was looking amazing. He was like the alpha apex predator for the most of the summer split in the West, right? But in the final, here's my issue. I said already, I actually think the Lissandra game he played pretty well, actually. I don't even know what he did wrong there. Like, he's just on Lissandra. Like, what do you want? He did what he could. He landed the fucking, he went in aggressively and did the claw and all the rest of it. Like, he did everything he pretty much could. So that one, I give him pass for. Game 3, there's a couple of moments maybe he gets something off. It's not that he played bad. I don't think he choked. I don't think he played shit in the series. I probably agree even that he would be the best player on G2. Yeah. My problem is just when you make that storyline, he is the GOAT. They even said all those stats. He's won 7 out of 7 finals. He had some bonkers game stat, mate. It was like that old Doublelift one like years ago. Yeah, where it was like, they said here that he'd won 21-3 in games in final. That is insane because, spoil, like 3 games wins the opponent in final, and obviously they never did. So he averaged a loss in a finals over 7 finals. Like, that is absurd. Like, that's the sort of shit that's amazing. But I have to say, in this final, it's not that Larson was like an unbelievable god. He was very good. But like, I did think like I needed a higher level from Caps though. I do think he didn't play close to his top level.
He didn't play at his top level for sure.
And he didn't look as dangerous, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, there was just some moments where it was just like, Caps, what are you doing? I mean, game 1 where he just didn't use ult, and like the whole game exploded because he didn't use ult on that timing. Like he ends up getting chunked by Marong. He doesn't want to ult away. He sees the LeBlanc coming over the wall, and he still doesn't want to ult, and then he dies. And because he dies, they transfer the pressure to bot, and bot dies. Like that is a game defining int where if you are playing on your top level, you just can't have a play. Like, you can't have a game losing play. Period. Like that's just what. Like, that's the standard he sets for himself. I'm not saying anyone else can't have a game-losing play. Like, there's times where, like, other players will have a bad play in a game. Sure, like, you could argue that Malrong, when he walked in and gave Draven a cash-in, that could be a game-losing play. Yeah. The problem is we're not calling Malrong the Western GOAT. Yes, so, exactly. Like, yes. If that is the standard that you set for yourself as Caps, like, you have to play almost flawlessly, and I do think he played slightly worse than what you'd expect. Because you expect almost perfection. Because
this is why I actually do have an issue, which is, even though I never thought that Rogue would beat them in the upper bracket final. I definitely didn't think they'd beat them in the final. The one thing I do think is egregious, and obviously it was pushed by fans, it was because G2 had won the upper bracket final because they won Spring, but people started pushing the idea again. Like that, if they almost made it sound like G2 was some sort of all-time great lineup. Dude, I don't think this 5-man lineup, look, Worlds hasn't happened yet, so maybe I'm made a fool, but I'm very confident I'm not. This is not going to be one of the all-time great League of Legends teams from Europe. Europe's had a lot of truly great, the old Fnatic, one of the older seasons, and the ones with Reckless, and you go through them, the super team with G2, and this isn't going to be one of them. This is actually more comparable to something like what Mad Lions did last year for me. Like, I think Caps was the best player, but I'll tell you what, in Spring, I really did think it was largely Caps and Jankos. Well, when Jankos drops off, immediately you see half the game's gone. And then when Caps doesn't perform, mate, this would be like a mid-table LEC team. I'm not even here to... BB played bad as well, true.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's... For me, I think that they've just been a solo lane dominated team. And they weren't able to get any advantage in solo lanes, really. And Caps, I mean, the Ahri pick in game 1, I think is fine, right? Like, I think that he just played poorly there. But the Ahri pick in game 3, that's just not an Ahri angle, but it feels like he just tried to do too much and he just didn't find the right solution because Larson played solid. Like, I mean, Caps did have that small outplay on Larson where Caps went forward and he was able to dodge the wall. Like, that was like a moment where it's like, oh shit, that's like Caps. He's like fighting back. Sure. But Larson just played solid enough where, yeah, you can't disrespect him like that. You can't just pick a matchup that's bad and just expect him to fucking play terrible. You know
what, though? I'll spin this into something. I was actually trying to make this point earlier, but I forgot it. I haven't had that much sleep, mate. Basically, here's the point I was going to make earlier, though. There's a very logical reason, I think, as to why teams will sometimes do that. And actually why, when you finally get beaten by the team that chokes us, always never lives up to the... I've got that one. Never lived up to expectations. Sometimes there's another angle. It doesn't always have to be a straight choke. You just don't play your top game. One of the reasons why, also, I think sometimes when they start to win, the other teams can even just fold immediately when you start to win, is because actually, over enough time, if you know they're always the chokers, and if your team, by the way, if your people are Jankos and Caps, like we are the clutch players, that becomes a factor that you just assume will be a fact in every game. You always think, well, I'm going to get a chance to get back in this game. They're going to give me an int at one point in time. You know what? Doesn't matter what we pick. Like, pick your strongest champion. We'll beat them anyway. Like, basically, actually makes you take them for granted. Like, the joke is, same thing with Larson, to be fair, right? If he carried these finals from mid, which is... It was the best split ever for someone to just think he's shit. He wasn't all LEC. It probably was just even on fourth. It would have been fourth or third, so it probably shouldn't have been all LEC. It was probably his worst split in his entire career. They come in. People didn't know he was going to play stuff like LeBlanc, so everyone's thinking he's just going to be the boring-ass mage player. Like, this would be the series where people would think he just picks his A 3 times if it's upright. No one's thinking you're going to have any chance to get outplayed by Larson or outlaned. No, not in a meaningful way. You might have more CS, but it's not going to win the game. So I also think if you're Caps, you couldn't expect this to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think if you're G2, you could expect almost any of this to happen. Like, that's the thing that's so funny about this split is this was Rogue's worst split as a team. This was like, even though they still got second, they didn't get second. They got third, right? Because Mad was ahead of them by one game. They ended up getting the second seed because of the fact that the whole LEC playoffs is completely fucked in this like disgusting
championship
system.
Just makes it,
it just makes it like so hard to actually get hyped for, world seeds and things that should be naturally hyped. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. We'll just stay on the topic. This is where this is where I felt like Larson was actually just not playing like his lanes that well. Like when you look at his laning, it's always been top tier. Like, I mean, in Spring Split, you would say he was probably he was probably the best, right? Like, he's
a very good CS if people don't. That's another reason I call him like Frog, and I can't believe people can't even see that, Dom. People don't even know how to judge fucking lanes is mental in it.
Yeah, no.
One thing you can't say he's a bad laner. I know exactly. Fucking mega laner
now. The thing that's crazy is that I feel like Larson just hates this narrative so much, and like it just feels like he's trying to like. He just always tries to deflect. He's like, no, but mages are just good. It's like, well, I mean, right here, mages are not like when you watch like the best fucking teams in the world play. What is Chovy playing? Like, sure, they do play Azir, but they play a ton of fucking Ahri. They play a ton of fucking Ahri. They play like, and his Ahri game wasn't bad, but there's clearly a difference between him playing Victor and Orianna and Azir and him playing Ahri, Silas, Akali. Even though his LeBlanc was fine, it's like, it's not the same level. So he just hates this comparison. I've heard you bring it up in interviews. I've heard him like defend this a bunch of times. There's no shame in that fucking game. There's no shame in the mage playing game. Like, just play what you're good at. Like, if you're good at something, you're good at something. Like that. you don't have to be the best at everything. You just need to be better than everyone at something, and then force them into your game, and then you could be a fucking champion. So
it's like one thing they do that I hate is there's a lot of really good players where maybe it's because fans just nitpick them for this, but if you ever point out like you're really good at A, you're amazing at B, you're pretty fucking good at C, but D you're not that good at, they'll be like, how dare you, I could do D and I am, it's oh bloody hell, you can't be the greatest at everything, you're not the fucking the GOAT, are you? Like, but the problem is they do like, it's almost like they want to be whatever they're not. Like, oh, I've got frizzy hair, better get straight hair, straighteners. Like, why not just have fucking sick frizzy hair, you idiot? So I agree, mate. I've always thought, this is why, by the way, I also fucked with Froggen so heavy, because you have to realise, even though Froggen could obviously play like something like an Echo or something stupid, some occasional stuff that wasn't like the traditional mage, his whole shit really was, oh no, I'm just going to play these mages as good as possible, and if my team actually allows me to win the championship, you can just say it after the interview when I win the championship, you can just say, oh, you didn't play those, and I'll be like, see, I've won the championship. Who gives a fuck? This is what I do. This is how I choose to play League of Legends. I also do think, that's why I keep pushing him on that, the idea is the heir to Froggen. I want him to just embrace it, Dom, and just be like, you know what, that everyone else wants me to pick a fucking crazy, like you say, a crazy Ari game here. Actually, this is my Victor angle. Like, try walking into this fucking team fight, homie. Like, that's what I want. I want you to just be a fucking beast. I even think that's the angle on Trophy I always loved. Until, like, obviously now he can do anything, but he's the guy who would sometimes do stupid ass picks that you were like, oh, why aren't you on a super carry champ? It's like, he just had his own idea. He was like, I'm going to carry on this champ. I've decided this is the one we're winning on.
Yep. No, definitely. Definitely. I'm with you there 100%. I think you should just do what you are good at. Like, even if what you're good at is not optimal, like, what does optimal even mean? Like, it's so weird how people talk about League of Legends these days, where it's like, there's just like an optimal way to play as if all players are. Oh,
you know, they don't watch the LPL. That's how you know they don't watch LPL, because you know this. The LPL is the ultimate region that's about. It's like, it's the famous saying that was in like in ancient Greece, there was a place called the Oracle of Delphi that you would go to, and they would take, interestingly enough, right, it was these women who were virgins, and they would, so you write their own jokes about fucking G2 and Fnatic fans and all reckless. The jokes are there, and they would, and believe it or not, they would actually sort of huff a thing. It's almost like copium. Yeah, we got, listen, they're writing the jokes themselves, but basically what they would do is they'd huff these vapors that would give you like a psychedelic effect, and they thought they would communicate with the gods, and they would give you a prophecy from the gods. Their eyes would roll back and sort of be like, you know, watch out, see ya, you will go into, it would be like of a movie or something, you know. And basically, when people would go there, one of the things it said over the door was this famous line. It said, know thyself. The LPL, and by the way, Europe back in the day, when everyone used to just try and copy Koreans, I always thought the LPL, Europe back in the day, when they would just play whatever they wanted, split push, all through mid, and then
triple
LPL
TPs
now,
when people would not play TPs.
That's that essentially the strength is, it really is as wacky as the thing they say in movies, kids. You want to be the best version of yourself, not a whack version of someone else. Like, you don't want to change yourself to fit in, you want to stand out. Like, those, I know it all sounds hackneyed, but it's legit advice. Like, I would actually say for players and teams, I wish more of them did this, mate. Like, for example, this is what G2 didn't do. G2 decided this, Dom, well, it's a fucking super global meta that's all about bot lane dominance. But we're not bitches like NA, so we're not just going Seraphine if we can't play bot. Give him all the strong carry picks. And it's like, that's not who he is. Like, that's unfair to... I am actually saying that. I genuinely think that was unfair to set Flakked up. Even if he asked for it, don't give him it. Like, by the way, if he asked for it, tell him to get the fuck out the team. I hope he knows his job isn't to play those champions. Like, if they'd have known themselves...
He seems hyper agreeable. Like, it seems
like... Oh, he does, yeah.
Like Flakked has, like, you know, like the like fake ego and stuff on like Twitter and stuff.
He's only memeing there, I know.
He seems very genuine, where he's like, I will do whatever it takes to win. He seems literally like a zero ego player, which is what I like about him. That's why I think he does so well within the team. That's literally why they got Flakked in the team, because he wasn't reckless. Because they were like, we don't want to have to deal with all this shit and play around fucking bot lane. We want to play with the player who will just do whatever it takes to win. And Flakked has that mentality, which is the correct mentality. That's the best part about him as a player. So use that to your advantage. Like, use that to your advantage. Like, you don't have to be something you're not. Dude, it's year number one. It's year fucking number one. Like,
here's the analogy I'd give you, because I don't hit on Flakked at all. In fact, that's why I wanted, if you saw, I tried to bait the G2 account into doing like a bet with me that if Rogue won, then like they'd only follow my account for a week or something. By the way, spoiler, that would have been fucking sick. It's so glad they're pussies and they didn't dare do it, little bitches. Oh, we're all loving bantering for you. You don't, you cowards. You just only want to talk more on memers. So when an actual real G steps up to the plate, they're fucking scared of the alpha, avert the eye contact, don't they? Whatever, that's all just fucking shit. I said that sounded cool. So when they did this though, the reason why I wanted to take this bet is because I actually said, the joke here, Dom, is I was baiting them. I said, if G2 wins though, I'll do a video about basically explaining how great Flacked's career was. Because by the way, that would be so easy. It's unbelievable. This is his first year. He made MSI, won a championship. He was looking like he was going to go back to back. He would have if they'd have obviously won this one and they completed the bet. He would have done it with some great players, but with a team that no one ever started the year saying should be number one. Everyone questioned him. He's a rookie. His teammates are rookie in his lane. There's a million factors I could go through, right? But here's the problem. At the end, the reason everyone's always going to think we hate Flakked is because since he's in G2 and G2 can win the championship, I can't compare Flakked to rookies like Unforgiven. I can't compare Flakked to just a Patrick or something like that.
People that have been playing for 2-3 years.
The problem I have is this. I have to compare Flakked because he's in G2. I have to compare him to the best possible ADC. So the analogy would be, it's like if Flakked was a pretty good point guard, but he's only 5'8". He could be as good as he wants as a point guard. He can pass the ball. He can even do a bit of scoring. If you're 5'8" in the NBA, you better be the greatest player of all time if you want to actually be a champion or something. It's going to be really hard. It's just height is a thing. So in the same way, he's good in some ways, but there's certain things either they haven't developed. Maybe in a few years he can get some of it, or he might just never be that player. And I don't think he needs to be that player necessarily. It's just that
it's hard to become that player because part of becoming that player is putting. This is the issue with that.
You can't just keep band-aiding the guy, right? You can't make him weak side every time if you want to be the best. It's the same with Danny, right? It's the same logic with him.
When you're on a really good team, you don't have the luxury of losing games to improve. If you're on a bad team, you're going to you're gonna have the ability to play a lot of these lane matchups and play these really difficult lanes in pressure moments.
He was on Astralis. He'd have to actually try and learn to carry because he's playing with solos that just lose all the game, innit?
The problem is that when you're on a good team, you're trying to win a fucking title. So you don't have time to actually work on all the stuff you're bad at. You're just trying to figure out the best possible ways that you can get to that goal. And by getting to that goal, you're probably going to miss out on a lot of growth opportunities. So that's the issue with trying to get better. I mean, that's something that you're obviously going to try in scrims every now and then, but you have to be realistic with the amount of time that it will take to actually level up the parts of your game that are not great. You can't just spend your whole scrim so we're bad at laning bot lane. Well, we're just going to pick a bunch of hard 2v2 super mechanical bot lanes and waste everyone else's time in the fucking scrim and potentially our coach's time to see if you'll be able to advance quick enough and get to a level where that can be a huge strength of our team,
By the way, if people want to see a player, I'll give you two players that I actually believe did this and nobody acknowledges either. They just either said they sucked at the time and then now they just say they were the best at times. It's Niski and Dom. Those two players, I'm not joking, they're almost the exact same time period as well that they have their careers. Go and look at the first years, then the second year, then the third year. Dude, these guys level up every single year. I'm not joking. They actually start not that good. They're sort of just middle of the pack, sometimes even maybe just average, or being below average maybe. Then you go year on year on year, and they not only level up, they add new things to their game. The joke about the last couple of years of Niski is, this is why I know people, listen, it's obviously because I'm a frog, and that's why I try to hyper-focus on the mid one, but if I could tell people don't watch lanes, because they would just talk Kozniski did all this god roaming, especially on Cloud9 and stuff, that as he was just the complete mid laner, and it was dude, if he goes to the Nash, he's going to get smashed by all these fucking god laners. He won't even get out of the lane. He'll be trapped. They'll just pin him in the... Knight, back... If he'd have gone to Season 10 Worlds, mate, he's lucky he didn't. Real Knight, the one that didn't really turn up to Worlds, would have fucking pinned him in lane and battered him, and then there would have never been a Niski. There would be no one else blabber. It would be over. So but you look
even worse for rookie. By
if he could have gone, this year though, dude. I know he didn't make it in the playoffs, but if he could have gone this year in his prime, he actually was looking good in lane. He actually could even handle some of this shit to some degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I completely agree with that. And part of the reason why those players are able to improve is because of the teams they played on. It's almost better. If you want to be the best player possible, it's almost better to go through the grind of being on an 8th place team and then a 5th place team and then a 3rd place team, because you just get to work on all the skill sets and your skills, your play is going to be the holes in your game are going to be way more obvious when you are winning and losing games off of it.
Yes.
If your top side is just fucking carrying the game and you're just kind of 50-50 laning and then you just group up with your team and you win, you didn't really learn that much as a player. You're just okay, nice. But this is why a lot of players are they overrate themselves and they go from good team to bad team. And this is something that I had to do in my career. I felt this myself because when I played with Season 2 Dig, I slotted into one of the best NA teams, and we won the Curse Invitational. We went to fucking IEM Hanover, and we had all these experiences where I'm competing against some of the best players and I'm able to do fine against some of the best players. So in my opinion, I'm like, oh shit, like I must be really good. And then when I got banned and I joined Curse and I was on a fucking bad team, it's like, holy shit, look at what all my teammates were covering. It just made me respect my old teammates so much more. I'm like, damn, like Cutie was actually super fucking smart.
Yes.
Like your teammates that are really good are going to protect you from yourselves. You don't know how fucking many dumb ideas you have until you actually have to play out your dumb ideas. And you're like, oh shit. So now if I make a mistake, we straight up lose because we are losing lanes. Like if we are losing lanes and I make a mistake, we're fucked. So it completely like helps you just advance as a player going through those phases. So yeah,
I even think it applies, by the way, to truly great players. Like, I'll give you an example. If anyone actually watches my shows and they don't just like listen to the jokes and listen to the real things I say,
look at Yangos.
They're actually a pretty good one. But I would say the best example for me is Reckless, because all my critiques of Reckless, by the way, are basically the first 3 years. After that, it's things about his personality, or maybe people overrate if he was like the solo carry. But I actually always thought the best thing that ever happened to Reckless was when he lost Expect here and he lost all those guys that were the solos. And you know that season 6 and 7 he had, where season 6 was whack as fuck. And it was where he had to play like fucking Kennen. And then eventually he started like hard carrying games. He had to just be like, you know what, actually I have to be forgiven. I'm basically on a forgiven team. It's not that great a lineup. Like, I've got to smash motherfuckers. And he actually built that into his game. And for the next couple of years, until he got like basically Caps got really good, he would sometimes the team would have to just go, it's all going to shit. The band-aid is play through Reckless. Well, remember, my critique of him was that he was the Flakked at times, a really amazing one, by the way. He's obviously more skilled than Flakked. But he would sometimes be the Flakked because he had the solo laners and he had the team fighters and he had, essentially, he could just be like the guy who cleaned up. So I think there's even another example. I think if he didn't go through those hard times, maybe he just always stays as a player where you have to just stash the whole team or he has no chance. Who knows?
Yep, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's so that's in a way it's almost beneficial for you to have the delayed success, you know, the delayed gratification, because it allows you to be more reflective of your own gameplay. It's very hard for players to like grow while they're like winning on a good team, because you just get like the dopamine from fucking winning. Like you won, so you don't want to feel like, oh, I won, but this guy was actually better than me. So most of the time when you win, you just try to like, you just do like the mental thing, just the defense mechanisms where you're like, oh, well, maybe that guy's better in lane, but I'm better at this stuff. But it's like, I mean, I'm better outside of lane. I'm a better team fighter or things like that. It's like, well, maybe like your teammates are setting you up so that you can team fight really well. When everything is on you and you have to be the one that calls out, hey, I need this guy marked from this flank. Like, you need to bait this ability, shield me when this happens. Like, you got to Mikhail's this. I'm going to cleanse the deck. Like, when you start having to do everything yourself, completely different skill set, completely different game.
I mean, put it this way, to draw a quick analogy to Counter-Strike, if people don't know, one of the really weird things about Counter-Strike is, aside from Astralis, there are no dynasties, Dom, that span multiple years. Like, I mean, there was Nip at the beginning of the year. There was 2 teams ever that did it. And that sounds weird, because you have to remember, in CS, early on, we used to have 3 majors a year, but then eventually it became like 2 majors a year, a long time. And yet the most, any majors, any one squad, like core run, was 4. But we've had like, I think we've had like 18 now or something. You'd think no one's won like 5 or something. And the reason why is exactly what you're talking about, is when people get a really good lineup together and it becomes the best, and especially in the first couple of years of their career, they win everything. Actually, when they, not only is it what you're saying, like they might not even work on another part of their game and become complete players, because as a team, they're complete. Like your team, you remember I always say that principle, the best team is the one where you cover my weaknesses, emphasize my strengths, and I manage to, maybe either I do it for you or someone else does it for you, and collectively, it's like a circle jerk. Everyone gets taken care of. That's all that matters at the end. So in this, as opposed to one team, it's just everyone jerking off forgiven. Like, come on! Like, I probably went too far with the analogy and the. Listen, it's Twitch, so it's not really, but I'd be banned off Twitch so fast it's mental in it. I know. But anyway, here's the angle I was going to sell.
People always ask me, why is Thorin never on any of your live views? It's like, because I try to keep my account. I want my account to stay intact.
So basically, the premise goes, I also think not only when you get on a worse team, at first, like you say, you think, well, look, I was like MVPs last year. I was winning the championship. Look, he's a bit worse, but we can get this done. Not only do you find out there might be deficiencies in your game, but then also, because you're so used to winning, you just actually drop off way faster. Because now you're super bummed you don't win. And you're like, oh, everything's going wrong. And by the way, that's why the best example ever is Reckless for that. If people don't know why I do look down on him a little bit as a person, it's because any time, dude, he even had like the third best roster, he essentially threw a tantrum and gave up and did stuff like stormed off, cried in front of everyone. Like he did stuff where it was like, dude, that would be like Forgiven's best roster ever. And this motherfucker would be grinding. So that's why in CS, basically, the example is, if you might know, the GOAT player, and it's not really even close, like the eye test is unreal, is Simple, right? Well, if you don't know, Simple didn't win the major till last year, but he was already like a world-class player in like 2016. Well, it took him almost 6 years, 5 years something, right? And what that meant was, though, because he never won, though, and he was always so close, he was just like, no one's grinded harder. He just went infinite hours, Dom. And then also, he even got the mindset where I even used to think, dude, this could be really unhealthy for you if you don't win when you have this mindset. He used to think, even if I'm actually the GOAT, because we already called him the GOAT 3 years before he won, even if I'm the GOAT and I am the best, if we lose and there was anything I could have done better, I have to get better. Right? That is the most fucking... What's sad about that is this, fans. If you do that, you'll die. You'll work yourself to death. You'll just have a breakdown. This guy was like, he just essentially gambled. Like, if I do it, I become the GOAT. Like, I can't be... He did. He got this level. So I'll give you the example. That's why, if you notice, I start making the case, like, I think Rookie could be the GOAT. Because I think actually the fact he didn't win much, dude, I think meant he kept at an insane level every year. Whereas actually, if you look at Faker's career, without making it a big digression, Faker's had a number of, like many of his last championships, he wasn't even close to the best player, or he could be like the third best mid in the league, never mind the world, but he could win still. Now it was about, oh, you know what, it's kind of like I can freewheel a bit, I can do this here, I could help you win. Like, Rookie can't do that. Rookie, every single year of his career has to be like, I have to be basically the best mid in this series, and even then I might lose. Like, it's why it's a very rare person can go through what they did. But I agree with you, it forges you at the end. By the way, it's like the fucking ultimate weapon. You can't be beaten then, you know.
Yep. I mean, it's perfect. I mean, that's part of the reason why I think that Bjergsen is the GOAT of NA. So we can lead into that, is because of, like, even though he was winning, just the mentality difference between him and Doublelift was so severe. The fact that he kept on pushing himself and he wasn't complacent is just made him a next gen. The
problem is we can't do that right now. I have to do a call for like half an hour. But that's a tease for the episode. Okay, whatever. We'll put that tease in. You can say it's not a forthcoming episode, and we'll release it afterwards. But yeah, there'll be one about Bjergsen being the GOAT or whatever. You'll actually find it'll be very interesting. It'll be more to discussion and exploration. So obviously that's going to be the end of the best Damn League show, because it's the end of the split. Thanks to everyone who came on, who were guests, of course. We'll try again next year to do this and run it back and all the rest of it. Can't believe Rogue actually did win at the end. It is actually mental. I know it still doesn't really feel real. It feels like I'm like on a really long LSD trip, and I'm gonna come out of it like, fuck, that was really crazy, dude. I had like Rogue was like smurfing on G2 and like,
I mean, this is what people don't understand. The reality that happens is not always the most likely reality.
No. Dude, that's my number one. This is my number one pet peeve, because basically it's another CSGO example. The most famous example in CSGO of this is when Cloud9 won the major. If you don't know, Cloud9 wouldn't be on anyone's top 20 list of all time. But the team they beat, FaZe Clan, is on everyone's top 20, and even might be in some people's top 10, but they didn't win that major. Because that's one of those ones, basically. And by the way, if you know the story, FaZe Clan beat them every tournament before, every tournament afterwards, and they almost won this. They were at championship point. So basically, what fans never understood was this, Dom. I acknowledge that Cloud9 won, but I'm saying if they had a 1 in 10 chance, that still means it 1 in 10 times it happens. And if it happens, you can't then go, must have been a 90% chance. It doesn't work that way. So I agree. That's the setup to your point. It's basically what you're saying, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that this Rogue win was probably the least likely of all the Rogue championships. Yeah. I think they had a better chance going into the spring finals, considering like their form compared to the rest of the league, their advantages compared to the rest of the league.
Absolutely.
I think
even spring 2021 maybe was probably better over Mad. They were in winning position there even. Yeah,
exactly. I think that's what makes this like so unexpected. And people are like, oh, well, they proved everyone wrong, so everyone must have just had like a horrible read. It's like, or Rogue like overperformed at a really crucial time. Like, look, this is the thing that I already know the comments are going to say. They're going to be like, Dom is not giving them credit for winning. It's like, no, that's not it at all. I'm just saying that there's a difference between performing under pressure and overcoming choking. Like, I'm just saying that there's a distinction between how you go into it and you know, where the other team is in relation to you and what your advantages are as a team. I think that this is actually like really fucking good for the LEC because it makes it less boring. Like now you're like, oh, well, you know, Rogue did win that one time. So now if we go into like a final next split, even if G2 looks like the favorite, it could be the same.
Be way more
G2 was the favorite last time. It just makes it way more hype. So I think that it's good to get more championships, more champions within your region, because then you'll have like Larson, who had his championship run now, and then you have Humanoid, and then you have like, you know, Nisku has a 1 in Europe yet, but 1 in NA, and then you have obviously like Perks, who's one of the GOATs, Caps as one of the GOATs. You just have like a much more interesting storyline now.
There you go then. So obviously there'll be way more hype with Rogue G2 next split. You had a player like Malrang who was a beast jungler. I'm a hype beast, so producer, kick it.